One thought becomes a mountain, one thought becomes a river, whales fall 10 miles, and all things are reborn. I have risen from the depths of the sea, climbed out of the abyss, and always believed that it was the mercy of heaven that made me start over again. Later it was discovered that it was to meet better people, family, friends, and loved ones. P.S. This is a story about the Internet King in Conan, with a female lead as a profile writer and a focus on learning criminal psychology, solving cases, and advancing emotions. In the early stage, the main focus was on the female protagonist's past legacy issues, with more emphasis on solving cases and brotherhood. The emotional drama is presented in the second volume. Keywords of the novel. Net easy whale no pop-ups, net easy whale 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 whale. Chapter 1. Initially. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Initially no one could have imagined that Zenshinling, who looked good during the day, would suddenly develop symptoms in the middle of the night, coughing almost to the point of losing her breath. Ada's room is adjacent to Zenshinling's room, just in case they can come over as soon as possible. At 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, Ada heard a suppressed cough, which continued one by one. Ada suddenly jumped out of bed and ran out to knock on Zenshinling's door. The door was locked and no one opened it. Ada paused for a moment, then kicked the door open. The bloody smell that greeted him as the door opened suddenly changed Ada's face. Ada turned on the light and saw Zhenjianling curled up on the bed, coughing in pain. The light-colored sheets that had just been sunburned were covered in large patches of blood, which looked shocking. Ada took the coat from the chair and wrapped Zenshinling around it, directly carrying the person away. Hold on a little longer, I'll take you to the hospital right away. Zenshinling, hold on. Perhaps due to the movement of her position, when Ada fastened her seatbelt, Zhenjianling coughed violently after a brief pause. This time, she coughed up fresh blood, which was bright and glaring. Shit. With a low curse, Ada stepped on the accelerator and rushed out directly. Even if he wasn't a doctor, he knew coughing blood was not a good thing. Ada made a phone call to Akira Oda while racing, which was initiated by the other party. If there was any accident with Makoto, she would contact him immediately. If she didn't contact him now, how long would she have to wait? At this moment, Oda Chimuro was sleeping when he was awakened by the urgent ringing of his phone. Before the other person could speak, he heard a heart-wrenching cough. Oda Chimuro's nerves immediately tensed and he said, "Speak. I'm Ada, Miss Alice is currently in danger. She has coughed up blood suddenly, which is bright red in color. I suspect that her abdominal blood vessels have ruptured. She is on her way to the hospital. Could you please find a doctor to take care of her? Zenshinling's injury is very troublesome. Ordinary doctors cannot handle it, and those who can handle it cannot explain the scars on her body. Go to the private hospital, right away. I'll have the doctor wait at the door, and I'll hurry over now," said Oda Chimuro, lifting the blanket and getting out of bed. Understood. Ada hung up the phone and turned right to go directly to the private hospital he mentioned. Taking advantage of his rush, Ada called Heizo Hattori again. His task was to protect Miss Alice's life. Now, fortunately, someone had an accident right under his nose, and he didn't dare to delay even if he had 10 heads. "Minister, Miss Alice has had an accident and coughed up a lot of blood. We are rushing to the hospital now, and Minister Oda will take over. Could you please ask Dr. Matsuno to prepare a video guide? Dr. Matsuno is the person who has the best understanding of Sonata Ling's physical condition, and every surgery is performed by him. He has also said that in the future, if there are any accidents, they should be contacted as soon as possible in order to find the cause faster and more prepared." Heizo Hattori was awakened by this phone call and immediately got up to change his clothes and contact Dr. Matsuno to be on standby. He is now rushing to Tokyo. Mrs. Jinghua also woke up and said, "Is there any urgent task?" "Ling has an accident, she's on her way to the hospital for rescue." I'll go take a look, said Heizo Hattori as he hurriedly changed his clothes. Mrs. Jinghua was taken aback and her drowsiness was also shaken away. Ling. How could this be? You can continue to rest. I'll leave first and let you know the news tomorrow morning. When Oda Chimuro arrived, Jintian-Ling had already been sent to the emergency room, and Ada was standing at the door. He didn't see what serious situation Zenshin-Ling was, but he saw blood stains on Ada's body, dark blood stains on the beige lady's windbreaker, and blood dripping from Zenshin-Ling's cough. Why was there a sudden rescue, said Oda Chihiro, wearing only a jacket and still pajamas inside. Ada looked at the crimson in her palm and said, I don't know. Everything was fine during the day, and she was also in a good mood. Around 2 o'clock, I heard a few coughs and went over to take a look. She had coughed so much that her bed was covered in blood. She used to be dark brown, but this time she coughed up fresh blood. Akira Oda looked at the blood-stained coat with a gloomy expression, damn it. Until dawn, even Heizo Hattori rushed over from Osaka, while Rino Makita was still in the operating room. Oda Chimuro clenched his fist, his revenge was still too light, and they should have paid the price of bleeding to pay for their lives. With a loud bang, the door to the operating room was pushed open, and the doctor walked out with a tired face. Who is the patient's family? I am. Akira Oda and Hiroshi Hattori passed by as the doctor came out, asking what the situation was. The back of the doctor's surgical gown was soaked, and his voice couldn't conceal fatigue. The patient's surgery was successful, but her body was very poor. This hemoptysis was caused by a small blood vessel in the abdominal cavity that was damaged and bleeding heavily. The patient may be in life-threatening condition at any time and must be hospitalized for observation and bed rest. I understand. The doctor nodded and understood. The patient should be sent directly to the intensive care unit. Visits are not allowed. You can take a look through the window. And, could you please sign this informed consent form? Hirasuke Hattori once again signed on the critical condition of Sanada Ling, and it wasn't long before he was sent to the intensive care unit again. Jintian Ling did not engage in any suicidal behavior this time, she was just really sleeping. She didn't know why there was sudden heavy bleeding, but everything was fine, and this situation was too sudden. Before going to bed, Zhen Tianling felt good and breathed a long sigh of relief. She was able to sleep soundly, but she didn't expect to wake up in just a few hours with intense pain. If I had to say something about the cause and effect, it was that Zenshinling might have breathed a sigh of relief. The breath that Zenshinling had been suppressing for so long had dissipated, and he was about to lose control. Zenshinling slept in a daze for a long time, waking up for no more than 2 hours every day. The only thing worth praising is Zenshinling's memory, perhaps because she wakes up for a while every day. This time, she has not lost her memory. It can be said that for as long as Shinichiro Makita and his team have been in training, Ling Makita has been receiving treatment in the hospital. Thanks to such a long period of cultivation, Zenshinling's body slowly improved, she ate and slept well, naturally recovered faster, and she looked more energetic. The only trouble is with Zenshinling's right hand. The doctor has done several tests, but the results are not very obvious, and it can be said that there is no hope of recovery. In fact, Zenshinling herself doesn't have much feeling, it's just that her right hand can't move, which may be normal for her. She can't even explain how many years she has been disabled, and using her left hand for a long time makes her forget about having another hand. When she first returned, she also instinctively ignored her right hand. However, they all hope that Zenshinling will train seriously, and perhaps there is still hope for recovery. Zhen Tianling can do whatever the doctor says, she is a very obedient patient. Before Zhen Tianling was hospitalized, she would suffer from insomnia every night. When she opened her eyes until dawn, perhaps the doctor had put some sleep aid in the infusion when she arrived at the hospital. She slept soundly every night, and in the shortest possible time, she met the standard allowed by the doctor to be discharged. Zenshinling thinks it's very good. The new house she cleaned up was taken to the hospital after not staying all night, which is really missed. Jin Tianling left, but was asked to wear a black wristwatch, which was a miniature body monitor for monitoring the frequency of heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, etc. when sleeping. If there were any unexpected events, they could be detected more promptly. When Jin Tianling returned home, it happened to be the weekend. After resting at home for 2 days, she went to the new school for classes. It was just right. Previously, she had been a police officer named Ayanami Itakura at school. This time, she didn't worry at all. She was surrounded by strangers, and even if there was something wrong with her, no one noticed it. The only surprise was that an unexpected guest arrived, Kenichiro Makita. In fact, it cannot be said that it was an accident. When Shinichiro Makita found out, he would definitely come over. Sanada Kenichiro returned from his training and felt uneasy on his way home. It wasn't until he arrived that he realized that Sanada Ling had already moved away and didn't leave a word for him. Just like before, Zenshinling let him go out and have fun, and she solved the Takuta family at home by herself. Last time, Jin Tianling wished him a smooth competition, but when he returned, everyone was gone, and the traces of her at home seemed to disappear in an instant. After Shinichiro Makita knocked on the door, it was Ada who opened it. Ada didn't say anything and brought the person to the side of Mori Makita. At this moment, Jin Tianling was resting, sitting on the lounge chair in the living room, with the warm sunlight shining on her, feeling particularly comfortable. After a few breaths, she felt sleepy. However, when Shinichiro Makita came over, she knew it. Although she didn't stand up, she also woke up and changed from a semi-lying position to a sitting position. There was still a lingering drowsiness in Makita Ling's voice, "Brother." Ada left with great vision. He went to the yard to wash the car, but he could also see their movements clearly through the glass. "Why do we have to move out alone?" said Shinichiro Makita, sitting next to Ling Makita after a long silence. "Are you not happy at home at all?" Jin Tianling looked at him and thought seriously, almost. This is the truth, she really isn't very happy at home, with too many worries every day. Sanada Kenichiro's eyes flickered slightly, and his fingers couldn't help but clench tightly. Can I still save it? Perhaps it was during these 2 days that Tian Ling's rest was well guaranteed, and she also had the mood to say a few more words to Shinichiro Makita. "Brother, you know, emotions are not just between men and women, but family also accounts for a large proportion, and there is also a saying of, fate without fate. Perhaps we were meant to be, brother. Even if you don't say it, I know I'm not suitable to live with others. Brother, don't rush to refuse, the fact is right in front of you. I can't open up to my brother and tell him everything you want to know. My brother can't continue to trust me like he did in the beginning. Perhaps we don't have much trust between us. I haven't told you the truth, and I always lie and deceive you. In that case, continuing to live together is just a disagreement between face and heart. What's the point?" End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Selection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Selection. Sanada Kenichiro lowered his head, unwilling to let Sanada Ling see his current expression clearly, feeling a bit embarrassed. After a while, he whispered, "I disappointed you, didn't I?" "It's already over," said Jin Tianling calmly. She has been resting very well these days, almost forgetting all the unpleasant things from the past, and even if she is disappointed, there will be a day in the past. Actually, my brother didn't do anything wrong, it's just that our concepts are a bit different, so our views on some things are also different. My older brother is very good, my grandparents are also very good, but my older brother is a bit clumsy. It's because I can't believe him wholeheartedly." Sanada Kenichiro's chest was a bit blocked, making it difficult for him to breathe. "Will it come back? Will it come back?" Jin Tianling looked at him quietly, as if she wanted to see another person through him and see if they would come back or something. "Brother, I don't want to hurt myself anymore," she said. "I don't want to make it difficult for you anymore. Didn't you notice, brother? The family has been silent for too long." Since I came, it hasn't been like this before. My appearance disrupted the normal trajectory, which is not right, so I want to break it back. Besides, brother, you are also very clear in your heart that my temper is very bad, completely different from what you imagine. Actually, big brother said something wrong. I'm not what I am now, but what I am. I'm just a newcomer, afraid of scaring you, so I've been trying to restrain myself. But I can't pretend for a lifetime. Look, isn't it just being exposed bit by bit now? If I had used my true personality to interact with my brother from the beginning, would he still be able to coexist peacefully and friendly with me? Brother has long been skeptical in his heart. Before hearing the phone argument, it was the time I was hospitalized before, but he didn't say anything. I have a bad temper and a bad magnetic field, which can easily cause trouble. Brother is also aware of this. Sometimes I don't argue with you because I don't think I'm wrong, I just don't want to bother with you. Now, I don't have the energy to argue with you endlessly, and it's useless. Sanada Kenichiro's mind buzzed and he couldn't speak for a long time. Brother always says that. You always apologize to me after making a mistake, but next time, you will still repeat your previous choice. Auntie, too. Time and time again, it's actually quite boring. I don't need to stand still and wait for others to choose, and it's best for my brother not to have any mercy on me. Brother, let's just keep it the same as the beginning. Sanada Kenichiro found himself completely powerless, without even the strength to lift his hand. If it weren't for him sitting on the sofa now, he might not even be able to stand steadily. Sanada Kenichiro's skin was dark, so he couldn't see clearly. The tail of his eyes was also red, and the pain from his heart extended to his limbs, making him unable to straighten his waist. Jintianling rarely says so much, and most of the time she is too lazy to talk to others. She doesn't even want to take a closer look at things she doesn't like. Now that he has said so much, Shinichiro Makita hopes that Makita will not say it anymore, because these represent Makita's true release. She no longer cares about what happened before, from the moment she left the house. Sanada Kenichiro gritted his teeth tightly, suppressing the surging emotions in his heart. His voice trembled with an imperceptible tremble. Ling, are you coming back? Didn't we agree to go home on the weekend? They have all left, there are no outsiders at home. Sanada Kenichiro mentioned that they were the Sanada Takeda and his family. From old age to young, they were politely invited to leave on the day Sanada Ling left, regardless of whether they would continue to stay in Kanagawa or not. Anyway, they have already left Sanada's home, and Sanada's younger brother is no exception. Jun Tianling didn't feel much when she heard these words. It didn't matter where the family was, it was just that after moving out, it was more convenient for her to start. Jun Tianling yawned bored and felt sleepy again. Really? That's good. I'll go back and take a look next week. Sanada Kenichiro looked at her uninterested expression and shut up. He was so devastated by Sanada Ling that he almost forgot about another important matter. Shinichiro Makita took out a gift box made of dark blue velvet fabric from the bag he brought with him, opened it, and pushed it to Ling Makita. This is what my father brought back, let me give it to you. The pearl necklace last time was broken, and I don't know if it's fixed or not. Let's just use this one to make do for it. If you don't like it, just put it in any place as a decoration, and I'll find something else. Jintianling looked at the valuable pink gemstone pearl necklace in front of her, which was a bit regrettable. It was not given at the right time, but it was just a bit. There is no girl who doesn't like gemstones, and Jintianling is no exception, but she is more picky. An unnamed gem, no matter how beautiful it may be, she will not be tempted. As I mentioned a long time ago, the gemstones that Jintianling likes were obtained by herself. Now, all the gemstones she possesses are rewards for solving cases and catching murderers. Jintianling regards them as spoils of war and is naturally willing to keep them. Of course, the most important thing is that she already has something pleasing to her heart, so she naturally doesn't need this supplement. A few days ago, after waking up in the hospital, another surgery and continuous rehabilitation training made Zenshinling feel a sense of depression and lethargy, and she didn't seem to have much energy. Hattori Hirosuk deliberately brought the sapphire necklace over, and Makita Ling recognized it at a glance. This necklace was the one she had originally chosen in the poison's nest, recognized at a glance in the dazzling jewelry. Initially, Hirosuk Hattori gave her another sapphire as a reward, but now the pearl is broken and someone has been sent to repair and set it. The necklace that Hattori Hirosuk brought this time is what Sanada Ling likes the most. The reason for the delay is not only due to the time of excavation and some procedures in the later stage, but also because Hattori Hirosuk had the necklace repaired, the diamond base melted and recast, and the letters Alice engraved on it, which means it belongs to Sanada Ling and no one can take it away. The pink gemstones brought by Shinichiro Makita are also very good, with purity, luster, and size no less than that sapphire, but Makita Ling likes sapphire pearl necklaces with her name engraved on them. Perhaps it was Shinichiro Makita who saw what Makita Ling meant. After a brief stalemate, he placed the necklace on the nearby coffee table. Makita Kenichiro is not good at words and has never had the experience of coaxing others. He is also an only child and does not frequently interact with his elder brother and Sasuke, let alone handle matters between siblings. In the past, when Zenshinling was in a bad mood, he would buy something and give it away. Zenshinling would accept it and gradually reconcile. He didn't know what to do one day when Tianling refused and she didn't want to accept it. After a long silence, Shinichiro Makita finally broke the deadlock and said, "How are you living here alone? Has anyone bullied you at school? How do I feel that after I left, you actually treated me better," said Shinichiro Makita, dragging her chin as she looked at Shinichiro Makita. Sanada Kenichiro's face stiffened and went blank for a moment. "I'm just joking, don't take it seriously," said Sanada Ling casually. "I'm pretty good here, eating and sleeping well, and no one bullies me at school. Brother, don't worry, Ado will take care of me, and he will solve everything." "That's good," said Kenichiro Makita in a low voice. Zenshinling is starting to feel drowsy again. She didn't mean to do it, it was simply a serious injury to her vitality. She needs to rest up, and even after sleeping for a long time, she still feels drowsy. Sanada Kenichiro looked at Sanada Ling's eyelids about to fight, with a tired expression on his face. He knew he didn't need to stay any longer. He took the initiative to stand up and bid farewell. "I'll come see you another day. I agreed to remember to go home next weekend." Jintianling responded, "Okay, then I won't see my brother off. Please be careful on the way." "Okay." Sanada Kenichiro walked out the door and saw Ada in the yard, with a fierce and evil expression. The expression in his eyes was heart-wrenching, and he couldn't even tell that he was an ordinary driver. However, it was the person that Sanada Ling trusted now, even more so than at home. "Please take care of her for the rest of the time," said Shinichiro Makita, bending slightly towards him. "If she forgets, please remember to remind her to come home for dinner next week, please. And if she doesn't like the necklace on the table, she can remove it and throw it into the fish tank, treating it as sand and stones." Ada raised his eyebrows and looked at the little ghost with great interest. After all, it was much more pleasing than the pile at home. But so what? Miss Alice is the one who really makes the decision, he can't control it. After Shinichiro Makita left, Ada glanced into the room through the glass. Miss Alice had already closed her eyes and fell asleep, with a thin blanket only covering her knees. Fortunately, the sun was good today, and he was sweating profusely in his short sleeves outside. Miss Alice should not have caught a cold. Miss Alice's body is so bad that she can't bear to look directly at it. Normally, people wear short sleeves and eat popsicles in the summer, but she still needs to cover herself with a thin blanket in the sunny afternoon. She can't even touch a cold bite, let alone fruits. They are all made into juice and then heated, and the taste is a bit strange. However, the doctor's requirement for daily supplementation of nutrients has been met. After leaving, Shinichiro Makita did not directly return to Shinagawa. He stood quietly at the door for a long time, adjusted his mentality, and sent a text message to his friend before leaving. Before leaving, he also looked at the house where Makita Ling currently lives. Until a pair of white sneakers appeared in his line of sight, and another young man, who was about his height and wore oval gold-rimmed glasses, stood still like a magnolia tree. After standing still, a cold voice came along, "Good day, Jun Jintian. Do you have anything to do with me?" Sanada Kenichiro is a familiar acquaintance, the head of the youth tennis department, and Takahiro Tezuka. "Tezuka, good day. I have something to ask of you." Takahiro Tezuka probably knew what Shinichiro Makita was going to say because he heard something from his mother. "There's a coffee shop ahead, sit down and chat." "Okay." A few scattered students in a small coffee shop covered their faces with their hands and whispered about something. Even the waiters couldn't help but run a few more times. The reason is that two students sat in the corner of the coffee shop, and at first glance, they didn't look like ordinary children. Coupled with their natural demeanor and handsome appearance, they didn't attract attention. However, the parties involved did not have any feelings, and even felt very low, just pretending not to be discovered. "Ling, she moved out alone and lives in Tokyo. Her leg injury hasn't healed yet, and her old injury hasn't healed," he said, unconsciously stirring the cup and spoon. "I applied for an exchange student at Emperor Dan Junior High School, but I only found out yesterday. So I specifically called you out to ask you to take care of her. Emperor Dan and Qingxue are very close, so please take a look at her if you have time. Ling always refuses to talk about her own affairs. I'm afraid I'm too far away and out of reach, so I won't be able to come over as soon as possible. Although she may not need it. I will take care of it," said Takahiro Tezuka quietly as he listened to Kenichiro Makita without disturbing him. "Enchantien has already contacted my mother since Ling Sang moved over, and I will pay attention to her situation. If there is any trouble, I will let you know as soon as possible." "Thank you," Shinichiro Makita said with lowered eyes. "You don't need to thank me, it's what I should do," said Takahiro Tezuka as he looked at him. Although he also felt that Jintian Ling did not need anyone's help, since she had already arrived in Tokyo, she still needed to pay more attention. Not only his mother, but also his grandfather asked him to pay more attention to the situation of Jintian Ling, and to handle any problems as soon as possible. After Shinichiro Makita left, she fell asleep in a daze. She didn't know how long she had slept. She was awakened by the extremely bitter smell of Chinese herbal medicine, which was even more stimulating than an alarm. Ada saw Zhenqianling open her eyes and walked over with a small white bowl. "Come on, wake up just fine. It's time to take the medicine, hurry up and drink it while it's hot," she said. Tianling looked at the dark brown soup in the bowl, which was full. The strange and pungent smell rushed to her head. She roused in her heart that what was just right when she woke up was that Ada always stuck to the time to cook medicine, deliberately making her wake up at this time. Even though she was in a foreign country, I don't know where the little uncle found an old Chinese medicine practitioner. She could still prescribe a whole set of Chinese medicine for her condition, 3 bowls a day, without stopping, just to recuperate her body. Jintianling touched the temperature and almost reached it. She lifted her head and took a sip to dry. If she took this medicine in small sips, it would be a nightmare. Ada timely pushed over a cup of warm water and let Zhenqianling brew the medicinal flavor. At the first meal, he actually prepared sugar, but Jintianling didn't want to eat it, so Ada had no choice but to change it. Such a bitter and astringent soup can make one swallow expressionlessly, but they are unwilling to take a sweet bite, which is not very effective. Ada remembered the doctor's advice and needed to find a way to make Zhenqianling eat more and strive for a weight gain of 5 pounds per week. With a scale as evidence, he must definitely fulfill such a simple requirement. After drinking the medicine, Jintianling lost her appetite and ate. Who could have a big appetite after drinking such a big bowl of medicine? But if you have no appetite, it's not that you can't eat it. You can still eat it with effort, because the consequences of not eating are very troublesome and completely unnecessary. Before 9 o'clock, Zhenqianling planned to go back to her room to sleep. She was tired again and it was time to go to bed. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Still okay. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Still okay. Drop by drop, drop by drop. Zhenqianling glanced at her phone and said, "Hello. It's me, Akamoto," said Kigo Asamoto in a low voice as he listened to the voice of Sanada Ling. "Are you at home tomorrow? I bought some medicine to deliver to you. It's been so long and I should have used it up last time." Zhenqianling avoided the microphone and yawned, "You don't need to come over." Kigo Asabe's eyes were slightly dark, and he clenched a tube of ointment with his fingers. The well-packaged paper boxes were flattened, and he asked softly, "Why? Why don't you let him go?" "I seem to have forgotten to tell you that I am currently working as an exchange student in the kingdom of Emperor Dan, and I live in Tokyo," Zhenqianling explained casually without much thought. Dan Guizhong. Kigo Asabe furrowed his brows slightly. "Why is this school?" He thought so, and accidentally asked. There are only a few good junior high schools in Tokyo, and the only one who still needs to exchange students now is Emperor Dan. Ice Emperor is good, but he is essentially an aristocratic school, and how troublesome it can be. Even if Tsulan Watanabe is there, she wouldn't choose trouble. "Are you living alone in Tokyo now? Have you recovered from your old injury?" said Kigo Asabu, recalling that Sanada Ling doesn't live with anyone else, so it's impossible to stay there. Zhenqianling said, "No, Ada lives with me. We'll live together. It's almost done, don't worry." Kigo Chubu pursed his lips and glanced at the clock on the wall. If it had passed now, it would have been too late. "I don't know the exact location, and it's almost time for Makita Ling to go to bed. Can I come to visit tomorrow?" "Zhenqianling, feel free, it's on **** Street. Come whenever you have time." Kigo Tsuchibu nodded and agreed. "Okay, if it's okay, I'll hang up first. Let's talk next time." Tsuchibu Jingwu listened to the ticking sound on the phone, his fingertips lightly tapping on the table. The rhythm was quite rhythmic. He read the news that day and also understood some of the things behind it. He didn't expect that all 4 members of the Takuta family, including 3, would be sentenced to death or executed immediately. That paper engagement naturally doesn't count anymore. The Sanada family is causing a lot of trouble in Kanagawa, making headlines in major news magazines. However, at this time, Sanada Ling has moved out of the house. Kigo Swobe understood a little better in her heart. Zhenqianling would not be wronged in vain. She would settle all the dirty things in the past one by one, and such a result would be just right. However, he didn't expect Zhenqianling to counterattack so quickly and forcefully. From an objective perspective. Well, it's quite exciting. Tonight, he will also rest early. Tomorrow, he will go to see Zhenqianling. People say that distant relatives are not as good as close neighbors. Zhenqianling has already lived in Tokyo, and they are neighbors when they are rounded. According to past customs, they will visit at their doorstep. Very good, Kigo Watanabe is very satisfied with this custom. Ada saw Zhenqianling returning to her room and reminded her to wear a detector to ensure that if there were any accidents at night, she could detect them in advance. "Zhenqianling, I got it." Ada cleaned up the restaurant and prepared to go to bed. To be honest, since following Miss Alice, his daily routine has been very regular, and his sleep quality has also been very good. This is something that has never happened during his undercover period. This is his dream retirement life. When turning off the lights in the living room, I arrived at the gift box on the coffee table. "Oh, what did Zhenqianling say earlier?" "We'll send it back when we meet next time, but that kid said he can feed the fish." Ada stood next to the fish tank and pondered for a moment. There were a few small fish floating around here, which seemed a bit deserted. How about throwing them in? Ada opened the gift box and was almost blinded by the light of the diamond. "Forget it, give it back to him next time you come." This thing doesn't seem ordinary at first glance. When thrown into the fish tank, he thought the fish might not be able to bear it, so he decided to turn off the lights and sleep. Early the next morning, Watanabe Jingwu drove over, and Ada opened the door to invite people in. "Isn't she in the room?" said Kigo Asabu as he followed him to the living room and found no one there. Ada walked towards the kitchen, still heating the milk. "Yes, I'll be out soon." Kigo Asabu placed the things he brought aside in a safe place and took the time to examine the place where Makita Ling currently lives. The house was not large in size, but it was decorated quite warmly. There was a large glass window to the east, which could see the yard, and sunlight could also shine. There was also a recliner placed on top of it, with a folded thin blanket. There is a vertical fish tank next to it, with several blue peacock fish swimming. On the coffee table on the opposite side of the sofa, there is an unfinished game of chess. Black chess takes the lead, while white chess stubbornly resists, and the outcome is determined. Kigo Tsuchibu grew up in England when he was a child and also studied chess. He was watching the moves of black chess. However, upon hearing the footsteps behind him, he immediately gave up watching chess and turned his head to look at Zenshinling. However, when he saw Zenshinling's face and her physical condition clearly, the hidden joy in his heart disappeared. How could this be? What is the problem with Zenshinling's body and why is she so weak? My face looks decent, but my size has noticeably decreased, and my clothes are also empty when I put them on. My left hand is still leaning on a cane, and there is no swinging posture in my right arm. I saw it a few days ago and it was quite normal on the day of the exam. How did it turn out like this in such a short time? Why did Jintianling move out? Is there another reason besides annoying those people and things? Jintianling was a bit surprised by how Okamoto Jingwu came so early. She hasn't had breakfast yet. You're here, just sit down and have whatever you want to drink. Take the fridge yourself. After waiting for a long time without anyone answering, Jin Tianling turned her head to look over and happened to align her gaze with that of Okamoto Jingwu. After all, it wasn't the first time she had seen it. I probably know some reasons, but do you have to look at me like this? It seemed like I was about to die, but the latter half of the sentence was not spoken by Jin Tianling because she was interrupted by this person's sharp voice. Ling. After shouting again, Tsuchibu Jingwu realized that his tone was not quite right, and he immediately restrained his tone. Ling, don't say those words, he said. He has heard it once before and never wants to hear it again. Jintianling blinked slightly, as if no one had spoken to her so loudly in a long time. Ling, you haven't been doing well lately, have you? Said Kigo Asubo, wanting to reach out and touch Zenshinling's cheek, but afraid of offending her. His palm stayed in mid-air and shook in the air for a moment before retracting and looking at Zenshinling with a sad expression. A ligament strain won't take so long to walk, and you won't lose so much weight. You used to be very healthy, not like you are now. Jintianling's eyes remained motionless, considering how to answer. Whether she was doing well or not, it was okay. She could still accept it. She still wore a human skin mask on her face, and if you look at her complexion alone, Jintianling is actually okay. It's just that the consecutive surgeries have made her extremely thin and bony. Even when you open her clothes, you can clearly see the ribs protruding from the surface of her skin. It's summer again now, and no matter how thick Jintianling is dressed, her changes in figure cannot be concealed. Yesterday, Jintian Xianichiro didn't notice because she was on the lounge chair, and the thin blanket covered more than half of it, so he naturally couldn't notice. But I wouldn't tell anyone about Jintianling's things at all. It's not appropriate, and it's too embarrassing. So Jintianling just said, probably because of the bitter summer, my diet has decreased. This sentence was not even believed by Kigo Tsuchibu, but Makita Ling was unwilling to say what he had in mind. Everything he could investigate himself was a normal result, and he could not continue to investigate further. After a moment of silence, Kigo Asabe asked in a low voice, do they all know? Jintianling, who knows? Ada brought out breakfast and placed it on the dining table. Jin Tianling asked, I haven't had breakfast yet. Do you want to come with me? All right, said Kigo Asabu as he looked at the dining table after all the dishes were served. Tsuchibu Jingwu noticed that the dishes placed in front of Zhenqianling were a bit like nutritious meals, specially paired with professional salespeople. However, Ada was quite confused and had everything, so he didn't refuse. After observing for a moment, Tsuchibu Jingwu realized that Zhenqianling was not interested in the food in front of her at all, just like completing a task and swallowing it whole. During the time when he was busy with the national competition and went to a closed training camp, what exactly happened to Zhenqianling? Why hasn't there been any news coming out? And is Zhenqianling really just a driver? Why did it happen when Zhenqianling was in poor physical condition? Have you never seen this person before? Kigo Swobe had countless questions in his heart, but he couldn't answer a single word. Even if asked, Zhenqianling may not be able to answer him, so why waste your effort and make Zhenqianling unhappy? He always says he's worried, but what's the use of worrying? Zhenqianling has not been able to endure all the sins he deserves. Can he just say a few words later on to eliminate them? Every time Tsuchibu Jingwu discovers that Makita Ling is injured and refuses to tell anyone, a feeling of powerlessness surges in his heart. This is an emotion he has never experienced before, but this emotion is clearly transmitted. Zhenqianling doesn't want to say anything more, and she probably thinks it's useless to say it. She would only waste her tongue like this. Kigo Asabu lowered his head and slowly ate, savoring the same flavor as chewing wax. Everything he had thought about last night had become empty. Zhenqianling's physical condition is even more worrying for him. What old injury is it that can make his right hand unable to move? Kigo Asabu thought to himself that he couldn't help but fall into a trance. Perhaps he should contact the rehabilitation center in Germany again, the hospital where Tezuka Kokuo went for treatment that year, and perhaps there could be a better solution. Zhenqianling finished her meal quickly and leaned back in her chair, silently watching the dazed look of Tobu Jingwu. Her sea-blue pupils had lost focus and landed somewhere in a daze. Ada clicked down half of the rice and vegetable roll. He looked at the two men without saying a word and focused on the boy. Tsuchibu Jingwu suddenly regained his senses and put a chopstick of food into his bowl. Before he could even start eating, he felt something was wrong. He looked up and saw the eyes of Makita Ling, looking at him with a heavy, dark expression. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Confession. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Confession. Kigo Asabe's heart tightened. Did he do something impolite? Why is Zhenqianling looking at him like this? What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like this? Zhenqianling glanced at his hand and said, just now you held a position and didn't move, just like you had settled down. Now you have recovered. For a moment, Kigo Tsuchibu was taken aback, thinking back on what he had just done. His mind was blank, and he couldn't remember it for just a moment. What was he thinking about coming here just now? He wanted to find a doctor for Zhenqianling. He accidentally overthought it. I accidentally lost my mind just now, it's impolite, said Kigo Asabu with a light cough. It's okay, said Zhenqianling nonchalantly. She finished her meal, but she couldn't leave Kigo Asabu alone at the table. It's not appropriate, but she's also a guest. Fortunately, Ada was also continuing to eat, so Kigo Asabu didn't feel too impolite, but he also accelerated his pace. Eating and drinking enough Zhenqianling made me feel a bit drowsy, but I restrained myself a bit and didn't show that much. Besides, the person hasn't left yet. Zhenqianling looked at the chessboard over there and casually asked, can you play chess, Chubu? I know it, I learned it when I was a child, said Kigo Asabu, nodding. That's just right. Zhenqianling pointed at the chessboard and said, do you have time? Do you want to have a game? Of course, I can, said Kigo Asabe as he sat across from him. Ada saw that Miss Ling had started playing chess again, so he quickly packed up his dishes and walked towards the kitchen, washing dishes and quickly going to wash them. It's all his fault for talking too much. Although Miss Ling was good at playing chess alone, he insisted on asking too much and even took the initiative to be his opponent. The result is good, he overestimates himself too much, the gameplay is completely different, it's very difficult to make. He is just a rough person. It's not a problem to wield swords and guns, but to avoid playing music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. He can't withstand it. Jin Tianling was originally looking for someone to play chess with, as for the opponent's level, it doesn't matter. But now she has improved a bit. Kyogo Watanabe's level is not just a little she learned when she was a child. There was no new move in the chess game, and it was Kigo Sugimoto who requested to continue playing the remaining game from last night. Unexpectedly, 15 minutes later, the inevitable death of white chess was brought back to life by Kigo Sugimoto. Jin Tianling put down a chess piece, pinched her chin and thought, while praising, "Okay, you're hiding it." "It's okay," said Kigo Asabu with a humble smile. "If one is not careful, the time spent playing chess becomes too long. Bai Qi made too many mistakes in the past, and even Jingwu Zhou cannot save it. At most, it extended the time of death." After being defeated by the general, Kigo Tsuchibu looked at Makita Ling in admiration. He had discovered something that Makita Ling didn't know a long time ago, and he felt like there was nothing that could stump Makita Ling. She was always able to solve it with ease. So, on the contrary, some people overlook the efforts behind this. No one is born to be good at these things, everything is brought about by hard work. Jin Tianling put the chess back in its original position and inadvertently met the gaze of Shigeru Ashikaga. Oh, why did she feel like she hadn't seen her for a while? Shigeru Ashikaga became more sensitive and emotional, expressing her emotions in a somewhat rich way. Kigo Asabe slightly avoided, restrained his emotions, and after a while, returned to his original state. At the same time, he let out a sigh in his heart. Why does he always lose his composure in front of Jin Tianling? He's not like this at all, it's really not glamorous. Kigo Asabu originally wanted to stay a little longer, but the phone and text messages kept urging him, so he had to leave early. If after he goes over, they find that there are some problems that can be easily solved, then they should wait for training. Take a good rest at home, I'll come see you another day. Wait until your legs are fine, then make an appointment with Xilang and the others to go out and play. Jin Tianling nodded and said, "Okay, you can leave and I won't send it. Please be careful on the way." "Okay." Kigo Tsuchibu turned around and glanced at her before leaving. Jin Tianling also planned to go back to her room to rest. As soon as she took 2 steps, she smelled a familiar smell. Jin Tianling looked expressionlessly at the small white bowl that Ada was holding in his hand, and the smell emanated from it. "When did you do it?" "Ada. After that kid left, drink it quickly. The temperature is just right. It's a bit late today, hurry up and drink it. There are other medications after drinking." "Okay," Zhenxinling reached out and took it, then looked up and worked in one breath. Ada is very satisfied because there are still many scattered medicines that need to be taken in large quantities, and they are necessary. Tianling took a good rest at home this weekend. Alright, she has been resting well every day recently. Tomorrow, I will go to Emperor Dan's class. Officer Itakura Ayanami, the school uniform, chose a shirt and pants specifically for the sake of Sanada Ling's health. Long leg socks can keep strangling the wound on the leg, making it uncomfortable throughout the day. It's more convenient to wear long pants. Ada escorted Zhenxinling to the school gate, and as she walked towards the school at such a young age, she had the illusion of sending her daughter to school, a father-like heartbreak. You see, Jin Tianling's hair is tied by him, because the hair on the back of her head is not straight, either horsetail or fried dough twists. Of course, he would never say such thoughts, they would be deadly. School or school, there hasn't been much change in a different place, it's all students of that age. As an exchange student who was transferred at the end, it was difficult for Zhenqianling to integrate into their original class, and of course, Zhenqianling never considered integrating. But there is still a lot of discussion about Zhenqianling in the class, buzzing and disturbing like that fly. The reason is simple. Firstly, Zhenqianling is beautiful, and attractive people are always more talked about. The second one is the cane in Zhenqianling's hand. It's so pitiful that such a beautiful person is actually disabled. Although they didn't explicitly state it, everyone's glances at them vaguely indicated this, that they thought they were hiding it well, but in reality, they wrote their own psychology on their faces. Zhenqianling had no emotional fluctuations, she didn't even recognize the people in the classroom. Does she care about the thoughts of some children? Of course not, it has no psychological burden on her. Occasionally it's boring, just like watching a mime. Zhenqianling never takes the initiative to talk to anyone, and during her lunch break, she only stays on the rooftop because it's sunny there. So, Zhenqianling was still a bit confused as she watched a classmate pass a pink letter. What was she doing? The boy was destined to win, but when he met Zhenqianling's gaze, he stuttered several times, and after a lot of useless nonsense, his ultimate goal was only one. I like you, let's date each other. At this moment, it happened to be the peak time to return to the classroom after lunch. The road was full of students coming and going, and they didn't leave one by one. They stopped to watch the excitement. Zhenqianling is willing to watch other lively events and doesn't want to become one on her own, let alone the nonsense this person says. TSK, what a 3-year-old child says is more sincere than that. I refuse, said Zhenqianling coldly, her gaze unchanged, and, you're in the way. Zhenqianling walked past him without hesitation and said these words in public, trying to force anyone, thinking she hadn't seen anyone confess. Neurosis. Sanada Ling's indifferent expression was too obvious, and her gaze towards Kawasaki Hongji was no different from that of a stone on the ground, without even hesitating for a moment. The students gathered around sighed and said, wow, this transfer student is so tough, he doesn't even give face to Kawasaki. What if she looks good? She's not a cripple yet. Is it her good fortune that Kawasaki can confess to her? Don't worry, there's no one Kawasaki can't catch up with. Let's see how many days this transfer student can hold on. I bet it won't exceed 3 days, Kawasaki Jun will definitely take her. The low voices of the students echoed into Kawasaki Hiroki's ears. He still had a smile on his face, but his eyes were gloomy. His mother, a little crippled, dares to wipe his face, he likes it to be her face, and she dares to refuse. Very good, you successfully caught his attention. Kawasaki Hiroki insisted on chasing after someone, and after that, when she was completely devoted to herself, she didn't hesitate to let go. Zhenqianling doesn't know. If she knew what this crazy person was thinking, she would only give 2 words, stupid. The mischievous students who knew Kawasaki Hongji didn't mind the excitement and actively encouraged him to cause trouble. There was some commotion here, and before Kawasaki Hiroki could say a word, he was interrupted by someone. What are you all doing here? The familiar voice made the students turn their heads and say, hello President. D. Dan, the president of the high school student union, Jiang Chuanbusi, is a 3rd grade student with good looks, good family background, and strong skills. He joined the student union as soon as he entered the first year of junior high school, but became the new president of the student union within a month. After taking office, he never left and remains a key player in the basketball department. Kawasaki Hiroki's face, which was originally slightly visible, suddenly fell short in front of the president. He was too short and lacked momentum, and his skin color was not as fair as the president's. It was impossible to compare people, and the difference was too obvious. In Japanese schools, the president of the student union is the largest, and sometimes the power of the president is even greater than that of the teachers. Students are more likely to follow the direction of the student union. There are still 3 minutes left for class. What are you doing around here? The students suddenly dispersed like birds and beasts, begging for mercy and running away. "Good afternoon, President," said Hiroki Kawasaki, standing there with a stiff smile and holding the undelivered letter. "Kawasaki-jun is so elegant. He just broke up with his girlfriend from another school, and now he has found his true love again," said Takashi Jiangchuan, glancing at the pink thing with a smirk. The sarcasm in the words can be heard by anyone. Kawasaki Hiroki turned his back and tightly gripped the envelope. The president laughed. "It's just that he likes someone, isn't it illegal?" "Kawasaki's love is really cheap," said Takashi Edagawa with a slight lift in his eyelids. Kawasaki Hiroki almost couldn't control his expression, his face turned black, and he didn't dare to really offend the president. "Kawasaki-jun, there is still 1 minute left for class. Being late will result in deduction of credits," said Takashi Jiangchuan, casually stroking the red armband on his sleeve. Kawasaki Hiroki: "Thank you very much for the president's reminder. I will go back immediately." As Kawasaki Hiroki turned around, Takashi Edagawa casually said, "By the way, for the sake of his fellow students, a friendly reminder. Before doing something, use your brain. Even if you have delusions, you need to consider your level. Some people are not something you can imagine." Kawasaki Hiroki didn't speak and his face looked very ugly. Jiang Chuanbu sure looked at his back and sneered lightly, not looking at what he was. Even if he were a playboy, he dared to pass a love letter to that Sanada Sang. Since Sanada Sang came to work as an exchange student, how many people have called him openly and secretly, afraid of making some mistakes. At first, he thought he was the great demon king of the mixed world, but when he arrived, it was completely different from what he had imagined. After observing for a while, he found that Sanada Sang was really a very solitary person. Attend classes on time, go back on your own after school, don't participate in club activities, don't chat with classmates. For such a long time, classmates are also nodding acquaintances, without any extra words, walking alone on crutches. However, Jiang Chuan held his chin tightly and pondered. If this real Tanzong had a cold face, a warm heart, and an innocent personality, and now he was alone and vulnerable, it would have been a big trouble if someone had taken advantage of him. After all, although Kawasaki Hiroki was a very trash person, with his barely visible face and meager family background, he was able to deceive many innocent young girls into entrusting their sincerity, and then he deceived their hearts. His academic performance plummeted, and in the end, he ended up in a miserable ending. There were several people he knew alone. This won't work. Jintian Sang is currently on his territory. If anything unexpected happens, it is still him who is unlucky. The consequences are too serious for him to afford. So he decisively took out his phone, flipped through several numbers, and sent a text message one by one. Alright, everyone is on the same boat now. Let's go, seniors. After school, Zenshinling got in the car and went home. Ada started the car and asked, "Did you encounter anything at school today?" He just casually asked, because Jintianling is usually too lazy to say, "It's too boring." But today he spoke up, "There's one thing." Ada looked at Jintianling in surprise and said, "What's going on?" "Someone confessed to me," said Jintianling as she lay flat and relaxed her legs. Ada. Ada. After returning home at night, Jintianling still had the same nutritious but tasteless dinner. Ada sat on the sofa after dinner, tapping on the computer without knowing what he was looking up. "What are you doing?" Jintianling looked at Ada with a serious expression and said strangely. Ada closed the computer and smiled at Zenshinling. "It's nothing, it's just a personal search, it's not important." "If it's not important, can you slightly reduce the smile on your face?" It looks scary, Jintianling thought silently in her heart. However, Jintianling didn't want to delve deeper and yawned, "I'll go to bed first. You can continue. Good night." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Thoughts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Thoughts. Ada saw that the person had returned to the bedroom, and as the door closed, he opened the computer again. The screen displayed all the personal information of a person, and the small 2-inch photo in the upper right corner was not Kawasaki Hiroki who was talking to Makita Ling during the day. Ada sneered at these materials, thinking it was someone with an iron head who dared to confess to Miss Ling. It turned out to be a donkey dung egg. Look at these materials. At a young age, if you don't study well, you're just going in and out of some kind of place. Those girlfriends on and off campus can almost circle around the school, and a pretty aunt on the street dares to come up and chat up. What thing? Dare to say those words too. Ada wouldn't believe that this person has fallen in love with Miss Ling. He may be holding back some bad tricks in his heart. It's true that there is a way in heaven where you don't go, but there is no way in hell where you insist on breaking through. If this scoundrel can hold his own after today and not mess with these little tricks, this matter will be turned over. But if you use any vulgar means in the future, don't blame him for bullying children. Jin Tianling didn't take this matter seriously at all. He even mentioned it to Ada in the car because he was bored and didn't have any extra meaning. She slept very well at night, without dreaming until dawn, and her sleeping posture remained unchanged. On the second day, Tianling went to class and Ada stood still as soon as he opened the door. Jin Tianling poked her head and saw two teenagers standing at her doorstep like two door gods. On the left is Kigo Asabe, and on the right is Takahiro Tezuka, both wearing their own school uniforms. To be honest, these two people stood on this street and the whole street lit up, shining brightly. Ada dodged and asked them to talk to each other. Kigo Tsukamoto put aside the hostility that had risen at the moment he saw the Tezuka national light and turned his head to look at Makita Ling. Takahiro Tezuka stood expressionlessly with a tennis bag on his back, feeling a bit confused about the meaning of Kigo Asobo. Jin Tianling looked at these two people and asked, "Did you happen to pass by, or did you come looking for me?" "I'm here to find you," said Kigo Asabu. First Tezuka Wangwang also said, "Ling sang, good day." "Good day, both of you," Jin Tianling exclaimed. "So what are you doing to block her doorstep in the morning? Is it something very important? But standing like this is not a problem, so, talk while walking." "Okay." Asterisk 2 Tezuka Wangwang looked at Sanada Ling with a hint of worry in his eyes. His memory of Sanada Ling still lingered on the rooftop of the abandoned building, not seeing each other for a long time. Suddenly, he was shocked by Sanada Ling's thin and weak body, as well as the crutch in his left hand. What exactly happened during this period? How could Jin Tianling be like this now? Tezuka Wangwang thought to himself and asked, "Is Lingsang's left leg better?" "It's okay, it's almost over." "You don't have to worry about a ligament strain," said Jin Tianling with a calm expression. "Ligament strain." Tezuka Wangwang, who had a clear understanding of Sanada Ling's military prowess, didn't believe his intuition, but Sanada Ling didn't want to say much, and he wouldn't offend him by asking, "Ling sang, if you have time, come and have a meal at home. My mother and grandfather really hope you can come." "There's nothing I can't agree to," replied Jin Tianling. "All right." Tsuchibu Jingwu followed Zhenqianling, listening to their conversation without saying a word. He put his hands in his pockets and his expression was somewhat dull. Chatting is about chatting a bit, but soon you will reach a fork in the road, and the directions of the three schools are different. Jin Tianling stopped and said, "So, are you two here early in the morning for any reason?" Takahiro Tezuka glanced at Kigo Mobu and paused for a moment before pondering. "Ling sang, the Kawasaki lord from yesterday. He's not as simple as he appears on the surface, and his personal life is a bit chaotic. When Ling sang interacts with him, be careful." As soon as he thought of this person, a layer of gloom covered his heart, and his eyes were not very kind. However, he still whispered to Jin Tianling, "I have heard of his flower name even in the Ice Emperor, and he is not a good person. Don't easily believe what he says. Of course, it's impossible. Kawasaki Hiroki can't be transmitted to Kigo Abe's ears. He's still far from good enough, but Kigo Abe found out about yesterday and investigated him thoroughly. His ancestors have been investigating him for 18 generations and it's certain that this guy is just trash. I understand what you're saying, said Jintianling, looking left at Tezuka Guoguang and right at Watanabe Jingwu. She remained silent for a moment, but who is Kawasaki? Do you all know each other? Now the silent person is replaced by Tezuka Atsuki, and the two of them take a glance at each other. Why don't they know? Ada and Zenshinling have been together for a while, and they have some understanding of Zenshinling's habits, especially her memory. Ada, who had been serving as the background board behind him all along, coughed softly without saying a word. After Zhen Tianling looked over, I told you a bunch of nonsense yesterday. After thinking for a moment, Zhen Tianling said, it's him. She roughly understood the reason for their appearance. Don't worry, I won't believe him. His eyes are cloudy, his mind is not right, there's no need to interact. Zhen Tianling is not yet fooled by a child, this kind of trick is not enough. And because it was too low level, Ling Zhentian didn't have much interest in playing, but the two of them still understood their intentions, and she wasn't really confused about what they meant. This person, could you please come over? I will pay attention at school. Tezuka Guoguang felt at ease when he saw Sanada Ling. Although he knew from the time he knew about this that Sanada Ling could not be deceived, he was still not at ease. After all, Sanada Ling's current situation was different, and his mother knew that she had been urging him to come over at this time, which was why he made this trip specifically. The time for early training is also approaching. Ling sang, Shubu Jun, then I'll say goodbye first. Jintian Ling, okay, pay attention to safety on the way. Kigo Asabe nodded, even though he knew. Tezuka Guoguang nodded slightly and turned around to leave. Only Kigo Asamoto remained motionless, and Narita Rin turned her head. Asamoto, don't you need early training? Kigo Tsuchibu looked at her deeply. Yesterday's incident, and seeing the Tezuka National Light as soon as he arrived this morning, made him feel a rare bit anxious. He would make up for the delay in early training, but there are still important things to attend to now. Do you still remember what he told you yesterday? Said Kigo Asabe after a long silence. Although Jintianling didn't understand why Kigo Watanabe asked so, she still answered honestly, I don't remember. I really don't remember, but Jintianling remembers someone who was particularly noisy, blocking the way, and saying a lot of useless nonsense. These things were forgotten in her ears, and it was already one night. How could she still remember them? It's okay, I just casually ask. If you don't remember, it's better. It's almost time for class. I'll leave first and come to see you another day. Please be careful on the way. Jintianling watched as Akamoto Jingwu strode away. Why did she suddenly get excited? Jintianling turned her gaze to Ada and asked, do you know? Ada immediately shook his head and said, don't look at me, I don't know anything. Alright, don't think about it. Maybe they're just happy to go to school. If they leave, we'll be late if we don't leave. Jintianling, oh. Ada glanced back and said, TSK, this kid's mind is not right. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Why it's necessary. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Why it's necessary. Madame Jintian felt a bit uneasy because tomorrow was the weekend and it was the day that Jintianling promised to come back for dinner. This is the first time that Jintianling has returned since she moved out. Recently, there were other things that she declined. In fact, when she first heard the rejection, Mrs. Jintian was not surprised because Jintianling was originally someone who loved to go out and play. When she was at home, she disappeared on weekends, and refusing to come back was also a normal situation. But no matter what I said before, it's confirmed that I will come back tomorrow. It's best to stay overnight, and if I don't stay, having a meal is also good. Madame Makita went to Makita Ling's room, which was clean and tidy. The sheets and covers needed to be replaced with new ones. Madame Makita smoothed out the wrinkles on the sheets, but suddenly felt a little sad. After standing quietly in place for a moment, tidying up his emotions, he turned around and left. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a sewn drawer next to Zhentianling's desk. It should have been accidentally touched by the nanny's cleaning arm. None of Zhentian's nannies dared to take care of their belongings without authorization. Madame Sanada was about to close it, but just as she closed it, she seemed to have seen something familiar. Her hand was placed on the round handle of the drawer, and her heart trembled slightly. It shouldn't be as she thought. Madame Sanada hesitated for a moment. She was supposed to leave, but she couldn't rest assured of the fleeting thing. She made up her mind to open the drawer and see clearly what was inside. However, Madame Sanada's hand hung weakly, unable to even catch her breath. Because there are nothing else in the drawer, just bank cards and red envelopes sent during the Chinese New Year, as well as some cash. The white seals on them have not been removed and are neatly arranged in the drawer. This is all the money that Zhentianling has given to her family since she was taken over. One of the platinum cards was personally given by Mrs. Zhentian, but they are now lying quietly in the drawer and not a single one has been taken away. Zhentianling walked thoroughly, not touching anything except her own belongings and intimate clothing, let alone money. She never spent anything before the incident, and now that she's gone, it's impossible to touch anyone who gave it. Madame Sanada leaned against the corner of the table and sat down weakly. After a low sigh, she looked up again and coldly confronted the calligraphy and painting on the wall. Calligraphy and painting. Wait a moment. How could it be calligraphy and painting? Madame Sanada stood up and took 2 steps closer. She remembered that this was originally an oil painting, a blue sea view. No, it's not right. At the beginning, when Mrs. Makita prepared a room for the incoming Makita Ling, the wall was hung with the current calligraphy and painting. That ocean oil painting was replaced by Zhentianling herself after living there for a period of time. It seems like it was painted by a street painter when Zhentianling went out to play. It is not worth money and does not match the decoration of this house. But Zhentianling took away all the oil paintings on the wall, but didn't take away a penny. How did she spend these days alone? Madame Zhentian suddenly felt a slight dizziness. She looked carefully at Zhentianling's bedroom, trying to discover something different. The bookshelf was slightly elevated. Previously, there were some books with spine facing inward on the lower level. Madame Makita asked Makita Ling strangely at that time, and she said it was a personal habit. Some stationery was still on the desk, and the calendar stayed the night before she left. The picture album and black film were all here. Madame Sanada carefully recalled that these were all gifts given by the Seishi on Christmas that year, all left here. Madame Zhentian went to the cloakroom to take a look. Most of the clothes were hung in the cabinet, and some even had hanging tags. She had also been to Ali's room. Ali wished he could bring all the clothes from the mall home, one without a duplicate sample a day, but Zhentianling never did. Madame Sanada turned to the piece of jewelry, and she remembered every piece. Each piece was valuable, but she lay quietly in the box without anyone interested, not even taking away the most ordinary pair of earrings. A pile of gift boxes were placed in the originally empty corner, which were gifts given by friends on Zhentianling's birthday. They were not even opened and were directly placed in the corner to generate dust. Madame Sanada stood supporting the cabinet railing for a long time, looking at everything here with disappointment, until her legs were almost numb before she stiffened and lifted her legs to leave. After returning to his room to change clothes after work, Makita Aquino saw his wife sitting by the bed, lost in thought, with a pile of paper documents beside her. What's going on? Isn't Ling coming back tomorrow? You were quite happy during the day, why are you so stunned now? Ling called and said she can't come back. No, Mrs. Sanada sighed lightly and handed over all the information to her husband. You should take a look first. Makita Aquino took these for unknown reasons. The bank consumption record is 0 and there is nothing. Makita Aquino frowned slightly, whose card is this? Madame Zhentian gave a bitter smile and said, these cards are mine, as well as yours and Dad. More precisely, they were the pocket money given to Ling when she was brought back. But as you can see, since Ling received the card, she hasn't spent a penny and didn't take it with her when she left, including cash and red envelopes for the Chinese New Year. They are all in the drawer and she hasn't even taken them. Makita Aquino's eyelids trembled as he clenched the paper in his hand, causing the flat A4 paper to crumple into a ball. Mrs. Gentian continued, I checked her consumption records and found out that the bank card she used belongs to Huagua. Ling has always used her own assets. With a deep sigh, Aquino Makita said, Ling. Since she has already agreed, Zenshinling will go back with Ada over the weekend and have a meal, it's not a big deal. Before we could reach the door, we saw Shinichiro Makita and Seishi Yukimura on the street. I've seen it all, but I can't just ignore it and pretend I haven't seen it. Jintian Ling is not that naive yet. Jintian Ling, are you waiting for me? Brother, Yukimura. It has been a long time since Yukimura Seishi saw Makita Ling. Today, when we meet, it feels like we have passed away. Ling. Good morning, Yukimura. And brother, good morning. After the national competition, too many things happened, such as the downfall of the Takuta family and the departure of Masuda Ling. Everything gathered together, and it was so fast that people couldn't react. At that time, although the head of the Yukimura family believed in his own son, he was also worried that his son would be deceived at a young age, and it was explicitly prohibited. Yukimura Seishi had no intention of interfering, and those days he was not in the right mood, only thinking of Makita Ling. Every time they misunderstood Zenshinling and believed in her childhood emotions, what Zenshinling was thinking, her clear black and white eyes, and what she saw. Although Jintian Ling had reminded him, he still believed in his friend. Now it seems like a complete joke. He also let a woman play with him, Yukimura Seishi, which is extremely ridiculous. Zenshinling specially changed into a looser outfit today. If you don't look closely, you can't even tell Zenshinling's body shape. It's just that she's wearing a bit thick. The pedestrians on the street are all short-sleeved skirts, and Zenshinling is still wearing the same old long clothes and pants. After looking around the person, Shinichiro Makita asked, is the ligament strain still okay? Jintian Ling, almost. Have you lost a lot of weight recently? Said Shinichiro Makita in silence for a moment. Ada raised his eyebrows next to him, this kid has finally grown eyes. Zenshinling lowered her head and said calmly, I'll just be praising me like my brother. Shinichiro Makita was taken aback for a moment, not quite understanding what it meant. Jintian Ling squinted her eyes and looked at Tian, then at these two people. Do you have to speak at the door? On such a hot day, no matter how cold Jintian Ling's body is, she can't keep sunbathing like this. Let's go back to the house first. Grandpa and mother are both here, and father will be back at noon. Even though it's been a while since we last saw each other, there seems to be nothing to say. Jintian Ling is not a good talker at first. She doesn't like to talk or initiate conversations with others. Jintian Pancher didn't need to say much, he just asked a few key questions, and there was nothing else to say. Madame Jintian wanted to say more, but as soon as she saw Jintian Ling, she felt a sense of guilt in her heart, and it grew stronger day by day. She didn't know what to say. After all, Masuda Aquino is just an uncle. He asked some important questions, and he doesn't know how to communicate with his niece for the rest. Jintian Ling doesn't care. If she asked, she would say it. If she didn't ask, she didn't take the initiative to share, and there was nothing more to say. She has been quite calm during this period, just recuperating honestly at home and not going anywhere. She also sleeps at home on weekends. At the end, Mrs. Jintian wanted to let Zenshinling stay for one night, but Zenshinling agreed. Everyone has come, it's not short of this night, just like before. At that time, what Zenshinling said was a relief. It was true. She no longer cared about these people, and naturally could not cause any harm to her. Everything returned to its original point, when Zhenqianling was just taken over. Zhenqianling felt that this was actually better, because taking care of her too much was actually a kind of boundary crossing for her, but thinking so also had a kind feeling of treating it like a donkey's liver and lungs, so Zhenqianling never mentioned it. She thinks the current way of getting along is just right. At night, Mrs. Makita knocked on the door with a glass of milk. Before, she would always come to her desk to do her homework. Today, she is sitting on the sofa reading a book. "Auntie," she said. Madame Sanada placed hot milk in front of her and said, "Just hot, drink while it's hot." Zhenqianling put down her book and said, "Okay." Madame Zhentian looked at the cane beside her and said, "Ling's leg hasn't recovered yet. Why don't we go to the hospital tomorrow for another check? Up. Even if it's a ligament strain, if it doesn't heal for a long time, it can still cause sequelae." Zhenqianling looked at her leg with no emotion in her eyes. Even if she goes to the hospital for proper treatment, there will still be sequelae. "No, auntie. I just had a check. Up at a hospital in Tokyo and the doctor said it's okay. The soreness is a normal manifestation and will improve in a while." Mrs. Zhentian couldn't say anything when she was rejected. "Then, Ling should be more careful and walk more steadily." "Okay." Without hesitation, Mrs. Zhentian stood up awkwardly and said, "Ling, it's getting late. After drinking milk, let's rest early. Good night and have a good dream." Zhentianling, "Thank you, auntie. Good night, too." Zhentianling looked at the closed door and then at the milk next to the table. Oh, why bother? End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Carnivorous Flowers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Carnivorous Flowers. Zhenqianling left after having breakfast the next day. It's uncertain whether she will come next week. Let's contact again later. Who knows what will happen in the next few days. Shinichiro Makita even came out to give her a ride, but he seemed to have something on his mind, his face serious, and when his gaze occasionally glanced at Ling Makita, he was hesitant to speak. Zhenqianling stopped and said, "Is there anything brother wants to say?" Sanada Kenichiro stopped and wanted to say something, but he didn't know how to say it for a moment. "If my brother doesn't have anything to say, then I'll leave first," continued Zhenqianling. "Wait a moment," Shinichiro Makita shouted to the other person, "there's something going on." Zhenqianling looked at him in silence. "Okay, you can tell me." "School, did someone confess to you at school? He, Kawasaki, has a bad reputation and average character. Don't easily believe what he says. What's so special about this person?" "They've all come to you," Shinichiro Makita said, looking at him strangely. In a special place, Kenichiro Makita thought about the information provided by Ryulin Ji. Does the special scum count as garbage? Others are not good. Don't worry, brother. I haven't reached this point of lameness yet and won't pay attention to him, said Zhenqianling with some helplessness. Anyway, I've been with my brother for so long and have seen many things in the world. Even if I really have a boyfriend in the future, I will still be at the level of my brother, and I still don't like those around me. To be honest, Zhenqianling felt their concerns were somewhat unbelievable. She's not blind yet, is she? If both parties have to make a choice, she knows which side to choose as a person, especially since she doesn't even remember the person's appearance. She has heard a lot about the name these past few days and knows a surname. Let's just forget about the rest. Shinichiro Makita breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He was also worried that someone might take advantage of Makita-Ling not being deceived. Since she knew it well, that's good, that's good. Sanada-Ling waved goodbye to him, and Sanada Saikairo stood still for a long time, refusing to leave even though the car had long disappeared. After returning to Tokyo, Zhenqianling continued her classes in a calm and orderly manner. But some people really don't have a long brain, can't understand human language, and insist on acting alone. When she has clearly refused and left no mercy, it is questionable if she still has the audacity to follow. Jin Tianling followed her words and ignored them completely, treating them as air. Sometimes, before Kawasaki Hiroki could finish a word, Jin Tianling would leave with a cane, feeling mentally ill. Kawasaki Hongji really doesn't believe it anymore. He can't even accept a little cripple, and his big talk has already been blown out in front of his friends. If he gets nothing, he will be laughed at to death. But he also hesitated to some extent about what the president said, always stopping people in places with fewer people. From beginning to end, Sanada Ling didn't even look at him in the eye, except for one time when Kawasaki wanted to reach out and touch her, when he was hit back with a crutch and said, "Get lost." At that moment, Kawasaki Hongji felt that his bones were about to break, and he almost couldn't stand up in pain. He watched as Sanada Ling left and cursed in his heart. Damn it, it's shameless to give him a face. Don't blame him for being ruthless. Unfortunately, this is in the kingdom of Emperor Dan, and their calculations are loud but they overlook one person. President of the D. Dan Junior High School Student Association, Jiang Chuanbushi. Meeting, President. Jiang Chuan accurately called out the names of these two girls and sighed, "Both of you, if you do this, it will make me, the president, very embarrassed. Emperor Dan's face will be ruined by you." "Yes, President, we didn't do it intentionally, really not intentionally." Jiang Chuanbushi didn't argue with them, but instead asked, "Do you think the classroom surveillance room is closed? Don't you really think that wearing a hat and mask will make no one recognize you?" The two girls turned pale and ran back in fear. "Yes, President." Jiang Chuanbushi's smile fell from the corner of his lips, his face expressionless and even somewhat gloomy. "Clean up in 5 minutes," he said, "if not, the classroom monitoring will play endlessly on the school forum, and you will also be recorded with major demerits and deducted credits. Can you watch these 5 minutes of safe graduation? Do you understand what I mean?" The two girls were frightened and tears uncontrollably fell down. "I understand," they said. "Don't you think it's too late to cry now?" Jiang Chuanbushi looked at their tears. "Don't try to provoke people you can't touch, the consequences are very serious. You should be grateful that I discovered it, otherwise, Jiang Chuanbushi sneered and suddenly said in a stern voice, "What are you still doing? Do you want me to teach you how to do it?" The two girls trembled and said, "We'll go right away. We'll definitely clean up. That's best. I'll check in 5 minutes. If it's still like this now, you two don't need to come back. By the way, there are still 4 minutes left." The eyes of the two girls were about to fall again, tears streaming down their faces as they cleaned up the mess and were afraid that they might miss out and lose credits. When Jin Tianling went to the classroom that day, she found that her desk had been passively placed. The books that had been neatly packed were arranged in an uneven and wrong order, and a few stationery items were clearly newly opened. Jin Tianling took a glance and guessed what the situation was, which was quite interesting. Afterwards, Jin Tianling discovered that anyone who didn't have eyes blocking the way, whether male or female, would have a third party intervene quickly. The armbands on their arms indicated that they were members of the student union. When Jin Tianling accidentally bumped into Jiang Chuanbushi, the president of the student union, in the hallway, she passed by and said thank you in an instant. Jiang Chuanbushi's smile deepened at the corner of his lips. "Not bad, not bad." Jin Tianling never paid attention to the commotion caused by those people. If she had the ability, she wouldn't be hiding behind their backs now. However, as soon as Jin Tianling and her thoughts wandered around in her mind, some people really rushed in front of her. On a very ordinary day, Jin Tianling was resting on the rooftop as usual. When it was about time, she was about to leave when she heard noise coming from outside the door. The large iron door on the rooftop made a clicking sound, making an unpleasant noise. Jin Tianling looked at the 4 boys who appeared in front of her, as well as a girl holding a mobile phone, constantly tapping into her. The faint sound from her phone seemed to be a live broadcast. Jin Tianling looked at them coldly, leaning on a cane and standing in place, without even moving her eyebrows. Jin Tianling ignored their meaningless and noisy nonsense that only hurt her ears. Jin Tianling is not surprised by the malice of these students. Some people are naturally crooked, which is normal. She has seen too many examples. Unfortunately, he was still beaten back and couldn't even get close to Jin Tianling within a step. Yes, Jin Tianling is indeed suffering from a serious injury, with no bones intact. However, this does not mean that Jin Tianling can be bullied. It is still a group of scumbags in school. Those who Jin Tianling can't beat are on the same level as her. As for these miscellaneous things, the end of the mobile live stream is about to explode, and anyone who can follow this girl knows that it's not a good thing. The poor students from various schools thought it would be as usual, but never expected such an ending. But these people only overlooked one thing: they exposed Jin Tianling online, which means that the Internet Supervision Department saw these live broadcasts, so guess who will come over? Ada was the first to break in, but the gatekeeper refused to let him in. He climbed over the wall and entered. The second one was the closest Jiangchuan Busi to Zhenqianling, who rushed over with his people. Because Zhenqianling's cane was resting on top of his eyeball, and the iron plate at the end pressed against his eyelids, he couldn't ignore his strength and told the boy that if he dared to move forward any further, his eyes would be blinded by this girl. The boy originally didn't believe it. He didn't believe it was not even up to his chest height, and the weak girl with disabled legs dared to resist and do so. But at such a close distance, he could see through Zhenqianling's eyes, cold and cruel without any emotion, as if looking at a little lamb waiting to be slaughtered on a sticky board. At this moment, Ada kicked open the iron gate on the rooftop and burst in, followed closely by Jiangchuan Busi. Jin Tianling didn't look back. With a force on her wrist, she pulled it towards his face, and with such force, she directly pulled the person to the ground. Her rough and thick cheeks swelled high, and her mouth was filled with blood. The boy let out a painful gasp on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood, including one tooth. Jin Tianling put down her cane and regained her quiet appearance. Her school uniform was neat, her face was calm, and even the hair that Ada had combed in the morning was not messy at all. Jin Tianling lifted her eyelids slightly and gave her final evaluation of their behavior. Waste. In fact, Ada and Jiangchuan arrived in a timely manner, less than 5 minutes, and even ordinary students could persist until they arrived. However, these miscellaneous pieces are too useless, and Jin Tianling is too powerful. She can hang and beat them with one hand standing in place, and she is unharmed. With a twitch of his mouth, Ada walked over and kicked the boy off the ground, then slammed his back against the wall before stopping. This was his way of holding back. After all, he was on campus. If he had used all his strength, he might not have wanted his ribs anymore, as there might have been internal organ ruptures. Then he took the phone from the girl's hand, and the live streaming interface had already been blocked. In her frightened gaze, Ada wiped the phone in half, picked up her collar, and threw the person aside. He has no rule of not hitting women, at most he just doesn't hit the face. Ada carefully looked at Jin Tianling and said, "How are you? Is it okay? Does your leg hurt?" Jin Tianling, "It's okay. It's really okay." Zhenqianling didn't even feel any leg pain. She used to walk for a long time and her legs hurt. Ada can't see anything with the naked eye, but for safety reasons, let's go to the hospital for a check. Up tonight. Anyway, the time is around, so it's okay to go a few days in advance. Jin Tianling lifted her leg and left, stopping in front of Jiangchuan Busi. "President, will I be remembered?" Jiangchuan Busi finally woke up from a dizzy state and unconsciously took 2 steps back. Unexpectedly, as soon as he moved, he hit the iron door behind him and made a particularly loud sound. Jiangchuan Busi almost couldn't control his expression and exerted all his strength to squeeze out a smile. "No, definitely not. Sonata Sang is also a victim," he said. "It's a mistake of our student union this time, and I will definitely give you a reasonable explanation and result," added Yasushi Jiangchuan. Jin Tianling nodded and said, "Thank you." Ada glanced at several students on the ground, hee. Ada left with Zhenqianling, and when she was descending the stairs, Zhenqianling paused for a moment. Ada noticed, I'll hold you down and take a leave this afternoon to go directly to the hospital. Okay. Ada picked up Zhenqianling with one hand and went to grab her cane with the other, accidentally scanning a crack and saying, Zhenqianling looked over and said, what's wrong? Adama shook his cane and hit the ground a few times before saying, your cane is broken, with a gap in the middle that won't hold the weight. I'll buy a new one on the road later. Zhenqianling's eyebrows furrowed slightly, it's so annoying that she even broke her cane. On the rooftop, Jiang Chuanbu looked at several thugs lying paralyzed on the ground, leaned against the wall, and took out his phone. Senior, did you see the live broadcast online just now? I always thought that the Zhenqian Sang you asked me to take care of was a delicate little white flower, at most a bit lonely. But I never expected her to be a domineering cannibal flower, she would be deadly. Jiang Chuanbu remembered the look in his eyes when Zhen Tianling lifted his eyes and cursed at that useless person just now. Even if it wasn't towards him, in that moment he still shouted until his scalp tingled and his legs softened a bit. Zhenqianling is definitely not an ordinary student, just a glance brings such a strong sense of oppression, and it is also when she is injured. And the man who took her away just now, Jiang Chuanbu has seen people driving her to school every day, but ordinary drivers and bodyguards don't have this kind of momentum. Tezuka Guoguang still doesn't know what happened. The live broadcast of that girl hasn't been watched by so many people yet, coupled with the timely blockade by the Internet Supervision Department, the live broadcast hasn't spread widely. But as Jiang Chuanjun spoke of being delicate and weak, he doubted whether he had not learned Chinese well, and which of these four characters was closer to Zhen Tianling. After a moment of silence, Takahiro Tezuka said, I never told you before. Jiang Chuanbu covered his face and sighed. Well, it was him who had a preconception and was deceived by Zhen Tianling's initially weak and harmless appearance. Zhen Tianling looked at the few people in front of her in surprise, including the school leaders and Captain Zhuo of Zhongban. How could the captain be at school, performing tasks? Before Zhenqianling could speak, Zhuoda Nakamoto walked over first. He looked at Zhenqianling's calf and clearly knew something about it. Is Miss Zhenqian injured? Is it okay? We need to go to the hospital for a check-up later, right? Zhen Tianling nodded and said, I will ask for leave from the teacher later and go to the hospital to see. Nakamoto Zhuo let out a long sigh and said, that's good. For safety reasons, let's let the doctor take a look. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Shocking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Shocking. Zhen Tianling looked at the group of people around them, as well as the police officers behind the captain. Captain, do you have anything important to do? Miss Zhenqian, I came to the school to summon a few people. They are involved in some cases, as well as the previous live broadcasts, which are suspected of illegal activities. They need to be taken to the police station to understand the situation. Okay. Zhuoda Nakamoto looked at Ada and said, it's okay. I'll handle it here, brother. Let's take her away first. Okay, you're busy, Ada responded and left with Zhen Tianling. Nakamoto Zhuo laughed heartily as he watched them leave, then his face suddenly turned cold and he stared gloomily at the only entrance to the rooftop. Jiang Chuanbu, along with these thugs, originally intended to drag them to the student union to handle, but as soon as he descended the stairs, he saw some police officers and school leaders. Jiang Chuanbu was taken aback and asked, what happened? Zhongban Zhuoda walked up to one of the students, presented his identification, and said seriously, a week ago, you appeared at the crime scene behind the bar. After investigation, we suspect that you have a close relationship with the victims. Please come with us. The boy's face turned pale and he said, I don't know, I didn't see anything. I really don't know. Whether you know it or not, you were on site at the time, please cooperate with our work. Boy. Jueda Nakamoto switched to another person and said, "You stayed at *** bar all night 3 days ago, didn't you? The bar's surveillance caught you. Such a boy is just being strong in front of the weak, and in front of the police, he dare not fart. A group of bullies who fear the hard. Did you come into contact with a person with green hair? We suspect you were also involved in their transaction. Follow me. Stop." Nakamoto Jua let out a loud burst of fear, causing the school leader beside him to tremble. "Hold down the person for me, where are you running, little bunny?" 2 policemen left and right pressed the stupid student who was trying to escape to the ground, and the student's body hit the lime ground heavily. The policeman's knee pressed on his back like a stone, suppressing all his resistance. "Be honest. Don't move." The boy struggled in pain, but couldn't even crawl an inch. "I didn't kill anyone. I didn't kill anyone. You can't catch me." Nakamoto Jueda grabbed his chin and said, "I haven't said anything yet, so you'll do it yourself. It's not up to you the final say or me the final say whether to kill people. It depends on the evidence. Cuff it up, take it away," said Takada Nakamoto with a wave of his hand. "Among these people, there is still the last girl left. You are called Melancholy Dream on the internet, right? There is no need to deny that these are all real name authentication. Finding you means everything is clear." The girl's face was devoid of blood, and her heavy makeup couldn't stop her pale expression. She also looked at her brother who had just talked to her and was now handcuffed, tears rolling in her eyes. Nakamoto Jueda showed no mercy and said, "Your live streaming content was suspected of being bloody and violent, seriously polluting the cleanliness of online platforms. You also engaged in inciting and instigating behavior, seriously endangering public safety and disrupting social order. Please come with me." The girl's tears welled up in her eyes, and she was almost unable to stand steadily. Why did she end up like this? Nakamoto Jueda didn't care about them. He took out a wrinkled consent form from his pocket and shook it, saying, "Leader, take a look. This is an arrest warrant, and we'll take these suspects with us first." The school leader wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said, "Just take it with you. We will definitely cooperate actively and definitely cooperate." The incident of Jin Tianling being taken away by a man at school inevitably caused discussions among the students, but everyone in the school knows that Jin Tianling has been on crutches since the first day she came over, and everyone knows that she is injured. Moreover, what's important to pay attention to as an exchange student? They left in a few days. On the contrary, witnessing the police come and handcuff students from the same school, this fact is even more explosive. The students are going crazy underground, and the junior high school student forum is also about to explode. But there's no other way, some people have done something wrong, they have to pay some price. Can't we say that because the victim has the ability to resist, these perpetrators are safe and sound? Dream it. Moreover, what Captain Jua Nakamoto said was not fabricated, it was all a matter of fact. However, these students had a relatively low sense of presence in those cases, which has been dragging on until now. During her examination at the hospital, Jin Tianling received a phone call from Oda Katsumiro. "Hello, little uncle. What did the doctor say?" Akira Oda signed while on the phone. Jin Tianling remembered the doctor's words, "It's pretty good, the recovery is pretty good, and I haven't been injured again." How could only a few scumbags have injured Zentianling? The only thing that injured her was her cane, which had been used for a long time. "If it's okay, just feel free to contact me anytime, no matter what." "Okay," said Jin Tianling later, while waiting for the doctor's other examination results in the office. "I answered a few more phone calls one after another. My friends at home in Osaka answered that it was okay, but it was already okay. She came to the hospital just in case, and the time for the follow-up examination was also up. It was just a one-time solution." After the doctor came out and said a few words of advice, Ada left with Jin Tianling. On the way home, Ada stopped on the street for a while, locked the car door, and Zenshinling rested inside alone. He came back soon, still holding a crutch in his hand, which had a very aged appearance. It was only a crutch that a grandfather in his 80s or 90s or a patient in a hospital would hold, ugly and unsightly. Jintianling looked at the cane brought back by Ada with an indescribable expression. Ada coughed lightly and explained, if it's customized, it will take time. We won't be able to produce it in the next 2 days, so let's stick with this for a few days. I'll urge them to try their best to speed it up. Jintianling, oh. Zenshinling went to the lounge chair to rest when she got home. It was still early and there was no time for dinner. Her mood was not very good and she needed to sleep to cushion it. Even if I had called, I couldn't rest assured. I hurried over and saw Ada watering flowers in the yard. It must be said that this scene was very impactful. Where is she? Said Kigo Asabu as he glanced into the room. Ada casually said, rest indoors, I'm angry. Are you angry with those people? Said Kigo Asabu as he paused in his footsteps and looked at Ada in surprise. Ada. How could it be? She's angry that her cane is broken and she thinks my new one is too ugly. Here, the person is resting on the chair and is about to wake up. You need to go in and wait for her to wake up. Sit at the door for a while. Ada knows about Zenshinling's friends and he never interferes, but no one can disturb her while Zenshinling is resting. The young man looked at his young age and sat outside for a while without any trouble. Didn't he see that he was already idle and started watering the flowers? Kigo Asabe knew that he was not foolish enough to wake up Sanada Ling just to say a few words of nonsense and actually found a chair in the yard to sit down. Jintianling slept straight into the sunset, and the setting sun reflected on her face. Jintianling's eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes, still feeling a bit dazed for a moment. Tsuchibu Jingwu really sat in the yard until Makita Ling woke up. The scorching summer sun was scorching, and he had never been exposed to it before except for training on the tennis court. Even sitting in the shadows, he was sweating profusely. His clothes were wet and dry, and beads of sweat rolled down to the ground, leaving some marks at Tsuchibu Jingwu's feet, which were then evaporated in an instant. Seeing Zenshinling sobering up on the lounge chair, Ada first pushed the door in and poured a cup of hot water for Zenshinling, placing it on the coffee table next to her. What time is it now? Jintianling pressed her neck, her voice still hoarse and not fully awake. Ada glanced at the clock and said, it's almost 7 o'clock. It's time for dinner. You sit here for a while, I'll go cook. By the way, your friend came to see you. Friend? Who is it? Jintianling turned her head and looked back. Tobu. Why are you here? Don't you need to train today? You finished before 7 o'clock, isn't it a bit early? Today is a free training session, arrange according to your own time, said Kigo Asabu without changing his expression. If this statement is heard by the selected players who are still training on the tennis court, they will definitely be attacked by eye contact and run in circles towards the sun. You people, almost exhausted and paralyzed. Jintianling let out a sigh and said, are you asking me for something? Looking at the appearance of Jintianling, who had completely ignored her, the expression between her eyebrows was plain. It was good, but that bunch of garbage was not worth remembering for Jintianling. There's no one at home, can we come and have a meal with you? Ada Yuguang, who was cutting vegetables in the kitchen, glanced at Jibu Jingwu and wondered how this kid had said such shameless words. Jintianling didn't expect Tobu Jingwu to say this. To be honest, it was a bit perfunctory. But it doesn't matter. With all of you here, can she still drive them out? Okay, you don't mind the simple dish of clear congee? Of course not, I don't mind. I'm not picky about food, I eat whatever I make, said Kigo Asabu, who was foolish enough to say he cares. The 5-star chef at the Watanabe Villa is about to cry and faint in the kitchen. The young master is not picky about food, which is definitely the most incredible sentence he has heard in his career. Can I borrow the restroom? I want to wash my face, said Kigo Asabu as he tugged at the collar. Jintianling's gaze fell on his partially concealed collarbone, which had a depression due to his great physique. Coupled with her radiant skin, she created an astonishing curve and said. Yes, it's on the innermost corner of your right hand. Akimoto Kigo said thank you and went over first. He was soaked in sweat and felt very uncomfortable. He really wanted to take a shower, but reality didn't allow it. He just made do and washed his face. Cold water poured down on his face, and at last, there was a hint of coolness in his face. As he took a tissue and wiped his face, his fingers suddenly froze, and a shocked expression appeared in the mirror. Just now, Kigo Asubo realized that the air conditioning in the house was not on. Even when he came over a few times, it was not on. So every time Kigo Asubo came over, he felt very hot. He thought he was seeing Sanada Ling nervous, so he didn't pay attention. But the feeling just now was too obvious. The weather outside was as high as 30 degrees Celsius, and the air conditioning was not turned on inside. Zhen Tianling was still sleeping in the sunshine, with a blanket on her legs and no sweat on her forehead. Zhen Tianling. What exactly is wrong with Zhen Tianling's body? The left leg that is still unable to walk normally, the right arm that is unable to move, abnormal sleep, and a slightly slimmer complexion compared to the previous body. Kigo Tsuchibu controlled his emotions and came out of the bathroom as if nothing had happened. However, while at the dining table, when Akimoto Kigo handed a tissue to Makita Ling, he accidentally touched Makita Ling's fingertips, and with one touch, he was afraid of being noticed by Makita Ling half a second later. Kigo Asabe quickly lowered his head to eat to cover up his emotions. The sensation just now was like touching an old piece of ice in an ice cellar, which was so piercing. It may not have been like this before. Kigo Asubo has touched the hand of Narita Ling several times, and the feeling of getting it is warm, a healthy and energetic body, rather than the current lack of vitality. Did Jintian Ling really not notice? How could this be possible? She just didn't say anything. There's nothing to say, and her body is just like this. It won't be able to recover to its former state in a short period of time, and she can only slowly recuperate in the later stage. This is a process that takes years and months, and she can't be impatient. Before leaving, Zenshinling still didn't go out to see her off, just said an extra sentence, "Swobe, don't think too much, I'm fine. Also, pay attention to safety on the way." Kigo Asabe held onto the door frame without turning back, his fingers tightly clasped, the veins on the back of his hand bulging, and the bones of his fingers clearly visible. He didn't turn back because he was afraid of losing his composure in front of Sanada Ling, which was the last thing he wanted to see. "Okay," he said, "take good care of yourself, I'll come see you tomorrow." He said he was done and left in a hurry, afraid that someone might be chasing him from behind. Jintian Ling pinched her chin and said, "How do I feel that his last sentence sounds strange?" Ada glanced in the direction he was leaving and said, "Maybe it's an illusion." Jintian Ling, maybe. The next morning, Kigo Asabe really came over. His purpose was very simple, it was to bring a cane, which was very beautiful, much more beautiful than the one Ada bought on the street, and also much more precious. It's so precious that even Jintian Ling feels hot in her hand. She's not very familiar with the art of wood, but because this type of wood is so precious and distinctive, she took a few extra glances while reading and jotted it down. Jintian Ling pushed the cane back and said, "I can't accept this. It's too expensive, and Ada bought it very well. The cane just needs to be used. It's just a piece of wood, it's not worth it. Don't you think that one's not good?" "Looking," said Jingwu Asabu with a slight frown, not understanding why Jintian Ling refused a piece of wood. "Is that all?" Jintian Ling glanced at the pattern on it and held the cane in her hand, which meant she had taken a house in the city center and couldn't shake it. Ada bought something a bit ugly, but it's convenient to use and doesn't hurt. Besides, Jintian Ling felt that the style of the cane, as well as the hidden ethnic emblem in the corner, "Is this yours?" Although you nobles may have used crutches for entertainment purposes, or perhaps called scepter more closely, how does she feel like this one was used by elders? Last night, Tsukimoto Jingwu, who had just emerged from his grandfather's study, nervously avoided his sight. As the saying goes, customized crutches take time, and craftsmen cannot make them all night. He can only find one from home. But the whole family only has it with my grandfather. When I took photos before, I took a few of them, but they can only be called decorations. There's something else to do with the student union, I'll leave first, said Jing Wudong, standing up and running away in a flash. His voice came from afar. Jintianling. She rubbed her eyebrows with a headache and asked Ada to put away this thing, looking at the pain in her eyes. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Puppetry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Puppetry. After resting at home for half a day, Jin Tianling returned to school to continue her classes. It seems that the incident of the student being taken away by the police yesterday is still under discussion. Those are all the things that were whispered in the school. Occasionally, a few words reach Jin Tianling's ears, and she walks calmly without paying any attention. Perhaps this behavior caught the attention of those behind it, or perhaps touched their fragile little hearts. In the following time, there will always be a letter stuffed into Zhenqianling's desk, which is very simple, asking Zhenqianling not to leave after school and to have a good conversation in an empty classroom. Unfortunately, Jintianling didn't even open the package and threw it directly into the trash can along with the garbage. Does she look too idle? She still has time to read their letters. After this move failed, the group of people began to send people to talk to Jin Tianling and ran away. Even the student union couldn't catch them. Jin Tianling understood what they were saying, but she just didn't want to answer. Tell her to go and wait. What kind of spring and autumn dream is she having? Does she appear to be someone who is on call? Zhenqianling's uncooperative and even malicious attitude finally caused dissatisfaction from the people behind her, and she personally found Zhenqianling in front of her. Jin Tianling saw this good-looking girl. Why did she fall in love with that person, Chuan? A good girl not only has a bad mind, but also has blind eyes and a weak brain. When Jin Tianling was stopped by her, Kawasaki Hongji appeared from somewhere and the two were arguing about something. Yawning Zhenqianling yawned. Uninteresting, a bit tired, they're really noisy. The sky is as blue as a wash, with white clouds floating in it. The sunshine is bright and bright, what a beautiful day. At this moment, an accident occurred. Zhenqianling was facing away from the direction of the administrative building, and she was impatiently about to leave due to their arguments when suddenly a sound of something rapidly descending came from behind. Jin Tianling's heart twitched slightly, but the sound was not right. She suddenly turned her head and saw a scene of a girl falling from a building. With a loud bang, the girl's body slammed heavily onto the concrete floor. At the height of an 8-story building, the person was instantly smashed into meat sauce, with blood splattering and yellow-white brain pulp mixed in. The closest people to where the girl landed were Zhenqianling and those two people who were arguing, and the blood splattered all over their bodies, with a lot of stains on their faces. Ah 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 ah. The mixed high notes of men and women exploded in Zhenqianling's ear, and Zhenqianling ignored their noise. As the girl fell, she seemed to see a silver light flashing, indicating what it was. Kawasaki Hiroki and the girl collapsed on the ground, and anyone who witnessed this bloody and cruel scene with their own eyes could not have been unharmed. Their noses were filled with a strong smell of blood, and they lay on the ground and vomited loudly. The nearby students also saw this scene and screamed one by one. The school suddenly became a mess. School leaders, teachers and security guards all ran out to maintain order and calm the students' emotions. Finally, the school forced the students to take a vacation, and everyone went home to rest. Without notice, they were not allowed to come to school for classes. The principal, who was almost retiring, heard this news and a student jumped to death in the administrative building. The old principal almost missed his back, shaking his hands and trembling his voice, asking someone to bring a quick-acting heart-saving pill, but he couldn't hold on anymore. A few days ago, he was only comforted by the police on the phone, and he was taught a lesson both openly and secretly. It was only a few days later when such a big event occurred. Which school can afford the public opinion of students jumping off buildings to commit suicide? Why is this? Everything can be solved, why choose such an extreme approach? He is getting old and can't bear it anymore. Amidst the chaos, Ling Zhentian stood quietly in place, allowing her bloodstains all over her body to carefully observe the body of the deceased. In a head-down landing position, the head was shattered into meat paste, and the brain was all flowing to the ground. The body presented a twisted posture, with bones probably all shattered and broken. He was wearing Emperor Dan's school uniform. Zhentian Ling noticed a blood line on her elbows, knees, and ankles, forming a blood-red circle on her white socks. Is it a string puppet? Zhentian Ling lightly tapped the ground with her cane, maybe it wasn't suicide. The silver flash she just saw was not an illusion. This is quite interesting. A brutal and bloody murder case has actually occurred in an ivory tower-like campus, which is headline news. The police arrived quickly, and Nakamoto Juada and a small team quickly arrived to block the scene and inquire about the parties involved in the crime. Then Juada Nakamoto turned his head and saw Sanada Ling standing quietly in the corner, letting Ada wipe the blood on her face. Juada Nakamoto was taken aback for a moment. "I'll go, why is Miss Alice implicated again?" After that, there was a surprise. Does that mean Miss Alice saw the incident and the case is about to be solved? The school forcibly released all junior high school students from their first, second, and third years back home, and prohibited any students from discussing these matters online. Only the students who stayed to witness the whole process with their own eyes were Zhentian Ling and those two idiots who were about to spit out their bile. In addition to Juada Nakamoto, there was another person who rushed over from home, the mother of Tezuka Kaikai and Tezuka Wangwang. The controversial incident of students jumping off buildings naturally caught the attention of all journalists, who flocked like great white sharks smelling blood. Tezuka Kaikai heard the news outside and looked at the address where it happened. Isn't that Emperor Dan Junior High School? Find a few more people to contact, and Zhentian Ling is on the scene. She is still staying at school and being questioned by the police. Where else can Tezuka Kaikai sit still? She promised Huizi to look for someone to take care of Ling well, how could she possibly leave Ling alone at school and be questioned by the police? Then, Zhentian Ling looked at the woman who suddenly appeared in front of her with some surprise, a bit familiar, but couldn't remember who it was. Tezuka Kaikai looked at the blood stains all over Sanada Ling and felt a little scared. It wasn't her cold-blooded nature. What if someone jumped off a building and fell, killing passers-by? Can she not worry? When a basket of words were about to be spoken in front of Zhentian Ling's gaze, they stuck on her lips and couldn't say anything. Her cold and indifferent eyes remained as if she had seen them for the first time, but there was a bit more confusion, as if wondering who she was. Why would you talk to her? Ada took a closer look and leaned in Narita's ear, saying, Madam Tezuka, the wife of Chief Tezuka of the Tokyo Police Department. Ah, Zhentian Ling knows who she is now. She said, why does she look a bit familiar? This is the mother of Tezuka Wangwang. Auntie Tezuka, I'm sorry for being impolite, said Zhentian Ling as she stood up with her cane. Zhentian Ling didn't mean it, she really can't remember people she've seen before. Tezuka Kaikai was taken aback for a moment and said, it's okay, you sit down first. It was me who was rude, Ling. Are you okay? Zhentian Ling shook her head and said, I'm fine. Aunt Tezuka, please make a special trip. Tezuka Kaikai looked at the polite child in front of her, and remembered when she had visited with Grandpa Makita before. In comparison, she suddenly realized that Makita Ling's gaze had never changed, forever indifferent and distant, but the corners of her lips had no curvature. It's like this, Zhentian Ling was originally like this, she used to just restrain herself slightly in front of her elders. From the moment he heard the news, Kigo Asabe put down everything he had and rushed over, still wearing the school uniform of the Ice Emperor. Emperor Dan Junior High School is surrounded by police cars, and the school gate is filled with bustling crowds, crowded and noisy. There are also reporters carrying equipment and desperately pushing forward, afraid of slowing down others and not grabbing the headline news. The weather is also extremely hot and dry, with every breath carrying the illusion of burning the heart and lungs. The nose is filled with the smell of sweat stains mixed together, and the closer it is to the center of the incident, there is also an indelible smell of blood. In the midst of chaos, Kigo Asabe saw at a glance Masuda Ling in the corner, standing quietly with a calm expression. He had seen the woman standing opposite her, the mother of Takahiro Tezuka. As he walked in, Kazuo Watanabe saw the bloodstains on Sanada Ling's body, spraying and dripping onto her white shirt. Perhaps there were also bloodstains on her long pants, but they were black and couldn't be seen. The blood on Zenshinling's face has been wiped clean by Ada, but it's not easy to handle on her clothes. Let's go home and change it. Kigo Asabu kept running in front of Makita Ling, putting his school uniform jacket over her body. He knew Makita Ling wouldn't feel hot, it was a cool place, and Ada was only wearing a short-sleeved shirt, otherwise he would have draped it over her. Ling, are you scared? Said Jingwu Asabu, taking a deep breath and calming his breath. Sweat beads rolled down his chin. Ling, are you scared? Zhen Tianling looked at the young man in front of her in surprise, hesitated for a moment, and then said, I'm fine, I wasn't scared. Are you okay? How does she feel that it's you who's in trouble instead? It's okay, it's just too hot, said Kigo Asabu, wiping the sweat off his face after confirming that there was nothing wrong with Sanada Ling. Kigo Asabu turned around and faced Tezuka Kaikai, restoring his usual appearance as a noble young master. Tezuka Auntie, it's impolite. Good day, he said. Madame Tezuka looked at these two children with some confusion. Jintianling was fine, there was nothing different, but why did she look at this young boy from the Ashikaga family? Good day, Lord Ashikaga. Madame Tezuka scrutinized the atmosphere between them without any trace, and Ada noticed it, but it didn't matter because there was indeed nothing left now. In a moment, Zhongban Zhuode and the school leaders came over, and there were some situations that needed to be answered by the parties involved. The parties involved were not just Zhen Tianling, but those students were vomiting almost dehydrated and couldn't ask. When asked, their faces turned pale and their heads turned to vomit. It was too hot on this day, and the smell made by these people was really strong. The only one sitting properly is Zhen Tianling. Although they came over, the school leaders kept talking. The student who jumped off the building had a student card on her body, so even if she felt completely unrecognizable, we could still identify who she was and compare her DNA to better determine the victim's name. The school leaders don't want to suppress this matter, they just don't want to cause too much trouble, and the pressure of public opinion can't be withstood. I heard their teacher say that this student is a solitary child with a somewhat paranoid personality and no friends. Recently, there has been a significant decline in grades, and the teacher has also talked about it, which is almost useless. The people in the class who know her have also mentioned it a few times. They have a strange temperament and are always nagging. So is it possible that this student couldn't bear the pressure and committed suicide? Officer, I'm not talking nonsense, but based on past experiences. The words of the school leader gradually faded away under Zhuozhongban's seemingly smiling expression. He took out a handkerchief and awkwardly wiped the sweat off his forehead, avoiding the police officer's gaze. Finally able to shut up, Zhuoda Nakamoto looked at Zenshinling with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Jintianling did not disappoint Nakamoto's great expectations. She pulled on her coat that was about to fall off, and then said calmly, "It's not suicide. I saw a fishing line, or a thin steel wire." Chua Nakamoto was surprised. Fishing line. Saburo Jingwu suddenly lowered his head to look at Makita Ling, his eyes full of disbelief. Ling. Tezuka Kaikai also looked at Sanada Ling in surprise. How could it be? Ling. Ada was not surprised at all. Before he came, Minister Yuan Shan had shown him the case handled by Miss Alice, which was just a small joke. Jueda Nakamoto didn't have time to care about the mood of the people next to him now. He took 2 more steps forward and restrained himself. What kind of fishing line? Captain, have you ever watched a puppet show? Said Zhen Tianling as she watched the victim fall from a building. Workers tie thin strings to the joints of the puppet, manipulating all the strings from behind to control its movements. Once the strings break, the puppet will fall and die. Zhen Tianling spoke shocking words in the most plain tone. Nakamoto Jueda instantly realized what Miss Alice meant. He took out his walkie-talkie and shouted, "Everyone surround the administrative building, no one is allowed to move. Investigate all the surveillance footage, call all the colleagues in the trace inspection department, and carefully examine the rooftop inch by inch. Focus on checking for fishing lines or thin steel wires, and then find a fixed position. Don't be idle downstairs either. Send in a few more people and expand the search range, with the administrative building as the center and a radius of 3 kilometers, to find all the linear things. There's also a forensic expert. Has the forensic expert started yet, haven't they? Hurry up and get the family's consent. This is murder, not suicide, and it must be dissected. After the family agrees, let the forensic expert focus on checking the position of the deceased's joints." Zhen Tianling reached out and felt the wind in mid-air. It was windy today. Just as the victim fell, her bangs were blown by the wind. It was the bangs hanging from the left side. Thinking about where the silver light appeared, she whispered, "Southwest, 8 o'clock. Jueda Nakamoto is about to jump up, he knows. Hurry up, hurry up. Send someone to the southwest at 8 o'clock and clean up the land for me. The evidence is there." Jueda Nakamoto never questioned what Miss Alice said. The fishing line is so light, and there is a wind today. Don't delay for too long, let the wind blow away again. Without thanking Miss Alice, he started running and the destination was 8 o'clock in the southwest. Grandma has a leg, if he doesn't find this fishing line now, he won't have the face to go back. End of this chapter. 10th Octopus Line. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 10th Octopus Line. Nakamoto Jueda ran with the police, and the area fell into a moment of silence in the shade. The only few people looked at Zhen Tianling in disbelief. The school leader's chin is almost falling to the ground. What's the situation? Why does that seemingly unruly police officer listen to a student's words? Tezuka Tsaitsai's eyes changed. Her husband is a police officer, her father-in-law is also a police officer, and the Tezuka family is a police family. How could she not understand the meaning behind what Sanada Ling said? But the question is, why did Officer Nakamoto not even question and listen to a young girl's words to investigate and gather evidence? Kigo Asabu's pupils trembled as he watched as his brain couldn't turn around for a moment. He understood every word that Zhen Tianling said, but he didn't understand why it was connected together. Zhen Tianling noticed their gaze and said, "Is there anything wrong? How do you know about all this?" Kigo Asabu pursed his lips and asked hesitantly. Zhen Tianling blinked slightly and said, "I saw it." Zhen Tianling didn't think there was anything to say about these, nor were they any important clues. If it were other police officers present, he would have noticed it too. It's quite simple. At 8 o'clock in the southwest, what is this? "What is this?" said Saburo Jingwu as he clenched his hand slightly on his side. "Maru, your hair is moving. It's the wind. It's blowing southwest today," said Masada Ling as she looked up at Kazuo Asabu. The issue of wind direction is also very simple. If you don't understand, you can also look at the weather forecast on your phone. As for 8 o'clock, she saw the last position of the silver light. To be honest, with Zhen Tianling's temper, she wouldn't explain so much to anyone else, it's too simple. But for the sake of friends, it's okay to say a few more words. For a moment, Kazuo Asabe didn't know what to say, and today's behavior of Ringo Makita gave him an unreal feeling. Is what Jin Tianling said really as simple as what she said? Just reach out and you'll know where the evidence has drifted. The police officer he just mentioned has been seen more than once, and they are all next to Jin Tianling. They seem very familiar, and he unconditionally believes what Jin Tianling said. Tsuchibu Jingwu stood in place, staring blankly at Makita Ling. Suddenly, a panic spread from the depths of his heart, as Makita Ling seemed to be getting further and further away from him. Do you seem surprised? Jin Tianling tilted her head to look at Akabe Jingwu, feeling puzzled. You've never told me these things before, have you? Said Kigo Asabe in silence for a moment. Jin Tianling said, didn't I say that? I remember telling you that I often watch Mr. Mori solve cases, and I have learned more knowledge. Jin Tianling had no intention of exposing herself completely in front of Madame Tezuka, and Ibu looked a bit stunned. It seems like she didn't say anything particularly important just now. Jin Tianling looked at Akamoto Jingwu in confusion and stopped speaking. This shouldn't be the first time, but Akamoto was still very surprised. Asabu Jingwu pressed his eyebrows, and the clear gaze of Zhenqianling made him feel that if he still didn't understand, it was his fault. Ada, who silently served as the background board, grinned silently and said, hey, there will be some to watch from now on. Madame Tezuka's eyebrows twitched slightly. Mr. Mori. Is he a detective? The sleeping Kagoro. Jin Tianling, yes. Does Aunt Tezuka also know Mr. Mori? He always appears on the headlines of the newspaper. Madame Tezuka shook her head and said, I don't know each other. I just heard of Mr. Mori's name in the newspaper. Are Ling and Mr. Mori very familiar? Jin Tianling thought for a moment and said, I am very familiar with Mr. Mori's daughter, Mori Lan. We are friends and often go out to play. Sometimes we encounter Mr. Mori solving cases, and he will tell us a lot of useful knowledge. Madame Tezuka breathed a sigh of relief. That makes sense. If that's the case, Jin Tianling didn't lie either. Although Mr. Maoli didn't seem very focused, he was very serious, especially when the case involved his wife and daughter. However, only she knew how much of what Mr. Mori said at the crime scene that Jin Tianling had heard. Didi Jin Tianling glanced at her phone and saw that it was Akira Oda. She didn't expect to call and said, hello, little uncle. How is the situation? Said Oda Kitamiro in the office. It's okay, isn't it? Sanada Ling calmly replied under the gaze of Madame Tezuka and Kigo Abe. It's really okay, she didn't go to the rooftop or see the autopsy report, and now it's just okay. There is a doubt that the deceased died when tied up, or fell and died after the thread broke. If the time is very close, the autopsy cannot detect it. Is there someone else next to me? Said Oda Chimuro with a slight pause as he signed, it's Auntie Tezuka and Tobu. Jin Tianling exclaimed, these two people. Okay, Akira Oda found out and finally advised, send the remaining information to your email, and all actions should be taken together with Ada. Okay. Madame Tezuka was a bit puzzled when she heard the sound of little uncle from Ling Jintian. Does the Jintian family still have this number one elder? Ling. Jin Tianling turned her head and said, Aunt Tezuka. Madame Tezuka hesitated and asked, Uncle. Are you an elder of the Sanada family? Jin Tianling, no, it's not related to the Jintian family. However, Jin Tianling roughly explained, they are my elders, who are very kind to me. Madame Tezuka was stunned for a moment. Do Ling have any other elders here? But more specifically, she didn't delve deeper. In fact, her relationship with Jin Tianling was not particularly close. She had only met a few times before, and a simple question would suffice. After asking more questions, even if it was a child in front of her, it was still a behavior beyond the boundaries. Jin Tianling doesn't matter. If someone asks, let's see who they are, and she will pick an answer. No one spoke next. They remained silent, and don't expect Zhenqianling to speak up voluntarily. Sitting like this, Zhenqianling didn't take long to start feeling sleepy, and sitting on a hard bench for a long time also made her waist uncomfortable. Zhenqianling wanted to go back. People are all guarding, and it's not convenient for her to do anything she wants. It's better to go home and rest first, and wait until she wakes up before speaking. Jin Tianling began to close her eyes and take a nap, only to be suddenly awakened by a shout. On the nearby lawn, a young police officer shouted with something in his hand, "I found it. Captain. I found the fishing line. There are still blood stains on it." Nakamoto Zhuo burst out laughing and said, "Quickly pack it up and send it to the laboratory to investigate the source of this fishing line and test all the DNA on it." Kigo Asabu lowered his head and looked at the drowsy Makita Ling, only to find her. Zenshinling yawned, so sleepy. Jueda Nakamoto ran over with an excited expression on his face and said, "Classmate, thank you so much for your help." However, when he saw the drowsiness on Zenshinling's face, he immediately realized, there's nothing else going on at school. You can go back first, and if you need anything later, we will contact you by phone. The rest is the stage of evidence collection, they can handle it. Of course, Jin Tianling has no objections. She stood up and said hello before leaving. Nakamoto Zhuo laughed and nodded at the two people next to Makita Ling. For some reason, he always felt that this woman was a bit familiar to him. Has he seen her somewhere before? Originally, it was for Zenshinling to come here. Now that Zenshinling is leaving, they naturally won't stay here. Madame Tezuka was thinking about something, and as soon as she looked up, she saw young boys and girls walking side by side, handsome and beautiful, shining brightly. No, Madame Tezuka realized later that there was something wrong. What about her son, who is so big and foolish like her? Where did he go when he fell off the chain at a critical moment? When Tezuka Guoguang arrived at Emperor Dan, he didn't say anything before receiving the look of his own mother who hated the iron for not turning into steel. Tezuka Guoguang. So, what happened in this short period of time, and what did his mother think of? Takahiro Tezuka walked up to him and first said to his mother, then looked at Akamoto and Makita Ling in turn, Ling sang. Jin Tianling, Senior Guoguang. Tezuka Guoguang saw that Sonata Ling's expression had not changed at all, and with his mother and Nasubo present, he thought it was no problem, so he didn't ask any more questions. Now it's the problem of going home. Jin Tianling wants to go back and sleep. So she politely said goodbye to Madame Tezuka, Auntie Tezuka, could you please make a special trip? It's already okay, Auntie, you can rest assured. Madame Tezuka understood that she had always thought that Sonata Ling was not an ordinary child, but now she was just more certain. Okay, Ling sang, please be safe on the way home. Feel free to call me if you have anything to do. If it's inconvenient, please contact Guoguang. He has been very free lately, so you can contact him anytime. Tezuka, Qingxian, Guoguang. Jin Tianling, okay, I will. Thank you, Aunt Tezuka. You're welcome, it's all our own people. It's getting hotter and hotter today. Ling, hurry up and get in the car and go back. We also need to go back. Jin Tianling nodded and said, okay, please be careful on your way. Madame Tezuka is an elder, so Sonata Ling only started moving after watching her get in the car and leave. Jin Tianling is going home, and Tezuka Guoguang will not follow him all the way back, so he will go back to school first. Only Akamoto Jingwu was left, and Makita Ling looked over and said, Akamoto, don't you need to go back to school? I'll take you back. Kigo Asabu shook his head and raised his eyebrows, why did he drip? He's such a big person and can't see it. Jin Tianling looked at him for a while and said, okay. After following the people back home, Kigo Asabu sat motionless on the sofa, looking somewhat solemn and unsure of what he was thinking. On weekdays, the beautiful and deep pupils stare at the fish tank empty, as if the few peacock fish inside can grow wings and fly. Jin Tianling leaned against the sofa, her fingertips tapping on the armrest in a regular manner, and quietly looked at Kigo Abe. After a long time, he still remained in that dazed state, and another one came. End of this chapter.